Are myths and fantasies of lost paradises, such as Atlantis, Lemuria, and the Garden of Eden, gone? Or have these sites genuinely disappeared from the earth? Furthermore, what about the renowned myths of a significant and universal deluge in numerous ancient civilizations? Could the limited survivors whose progeny repopulated the earth have immortalized in myth a monumental deluge that inundated entire populations and submerged communities globally? I have dedicated my life to investigating historical enigmas including legendary creatures, unusual cultures, esoteric relics, and vanished territories. In nearly every case, I have discovered a concealed truth, a small yet significant detail comparable to the minute element within a pearl. Much of human history, prehistory, transpired in a markedly different world than our own. Sea levels were several hundred feet lower than present, revealing extensive portions of the continental shelves as terrestrial land until 10,500 years ago, when substantial quantities of the Earth's water solidified into expansive, multi-mile-thick ice sheets that enveloped much of North America and northern Europe. The Würm glaciation endured for 500 years. The selection of sites for human habitation has consistently been at the confluence of rivers and the ocean. In addition to fresh water from rivers and plentiful seafood, basic modes of transportation exist, upstream and along the coast. At the conclusion of the last ice age, approximately 10,500 years ago, a significant comet or asteroid impact in the Bahamas resulted in ice melting, elevating sea levels by 400 feet. This caused new coastlines to shift hundreds of miles inland, submerging over 10 million square miles of previously habitable land. The ocean's waves inundate previously prime real estate, now submerged hundreds of feet below, as rivers persistently flow into the seas, depositing millennia of sediment. Future generations will need to excavate prehistoric sites currently inaccessible to contemporary archaeologists. Researchers are discovering submerged megalithic ruins in various previously arid locations. The ruins comprise the contentious Bimini Wall and additional rectangular and pyramidal structures at multiple offshore sites. In 1985, researchers uncovered a colossal temple-like structure off the coast of Yonaguni-jima, the southernmost island of Japan. It measures over 165 feet in length and 65 feet in width, with its foundation situated 80 feet below the surface, and its apex located 16 feet beneath the water's surface. Certain enigmatic ancient monuments, such as the Great Sphinx of Egypt's Giza Plateau, are now considered to be significantly older than previously thought, with some origins potentially extending beyond 10,500 years. The ancient Sumerians, Babylonians, Assyrians, and Hebrews all narrated stories of a once existing terrestrial paradise, now irrevocably lost. The Bible states, Genesis 2:8-14, Yahweh. God established a garden in the eastern region of Eden and placed the man he had created there. Yahweh God caused every type of tree to emerge from the earth, aesthetically pleasing and edible, including the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil in the garden's center. Eden obtained water from a river that bifurcated into 4 tributaries. The initial river is the Pishon. It meanders throughout Havilah, a gold-famous region. That land contains pure gold, bdellium, and onyx stone, the designation. The Gihon, the second river, traverses the entirety of the land of Cush. The Tigris, the third river, courses east of Ashur. Additionally, the fourth river is the Euphrates. Jerusalem Bible, copyright 1966. This denotes a specific geographical location at the junction of 4 prominent rivers. The Tigris and Euphrates rivers are renowned for delineating Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers and converge at the northern tip of the Persian Gulf. Nonetheless, what are the locations of the Pishon and Gihon rivers? No other rivers traverse the desert sands to converge with the Tigris and Euphrates. Dr. Juris Zarins of Southwest Missouri State University posits that the Garden of Eden is currently submerged beneath the waters of the Persian Gulf. He references Landsat satellite imagery that uncovers a fossil river previously traversed northern Arabia and the currently arid ravines, wadis, recognized by contemporary Saudis and Kuwaitis as Wadi Rima and Wadi Batin. Moreover, the Book of Genesis indicates that this area was historically abundant in aromatic gum resin, referred to as bdellium, which remains present in North Arabia, and gold, which continued to be extracted in that region during the 1950s. Consequently, the presently desiccated Rima Batin River was formerly called the Pishon. Zarins posits that the biblical Gihon corresponds to the Karun River, which emanates from Persia, present-day Iran, and courses southwest toward the Gulf. Landsat imagery additionally depicts the Karun. Until 1765, the Hafr Channel, excavated in 986 to enhance shipping between Avaz and Basra, redirected the Karun, supplying most of the sediment that constituted the delta at the head of the Persian Gulf. During the Great Ice Age, extensive ice sheets across continents sequestered substantial quantities of water, resulting in a 400-foot sea level decline. This rendered the present-day Persian Gulf a terrestrial expanse extending to the Strait of Hormuz. The currently existing Tigris and Euphrates rivers, along with the extinct Gihon and Pishon rivers and their tributaries from the Arabian Peninsula and Iran, irrigated the Gulf. The Sumerians pioneered writing and documented the myth of a fertile and beautiful region named Dilmun, situated on elevated terrain along the eastern coast of Arabia. Dilmun appears in the Sumerian creation myths of the 3rd millennium BCE. The ancient myth of a land of abundance, eternal life, and peace had firmly entrenched itself in the collective consciousness and a particular location. In the Sumerian epic Enki and Ninhursag, Enki, the lord of Ab, denoting fresh water, resides with his wife in the paradise of Dilmun. The land of Dilmun is pristine. The land of Dilmun is untainted. The land of Dilmun is luminous. The solitary individual reclines in Dilmun. The region beyond Enki is pristine and luminous. Like the biblical Garden of Eden, Dilmun was a tranquil locale where the lion did not kill, the wolf did not seize the lamb, the kid-killing dog was unknown, and the grain-devouring boar was absent. Despite Dilmun's water scarcity, Enki heeded the pleas of its goddess Ninsikil and directed the sun god Utu to procure fresh water from the earth for Dilmun. Consequently, her city consumes the water of abundance. Dilmun consumes the water of abundance. Her brackish water sources convert into pure water, and her fields and farms produce crops and grains. Her city has become the hub of the region's banks and docks. The Neolithic wet phase occurred circa 6,000 or 5,000 BCE, marked by the return of precipitation to the Gulf region after an extended arid interval. The territories of contemporary eastern and northeastern Saudi Arabia and southwestern Iran, previously arid and desolate, transformed into verdant and fertile regions. Foragers migrated to this idyllic region where the 4 rivers flowed abundantly. In this verdant and fertile valley known as Eden, humanity cultivated its inaugural garden. The Flandrian transgression, a rapid increase in global sea level, transpired post 5000 BCE as a result of the ongoing melting of Ice Age glaciers. Circa 4000 BCE, the Gulf commenced inundation, engulfing Eden and all coastal settlements, ultimately extending into the southern territories of present-day Iraq and Iran. Eden submerged beneath the ascending waters, expelling humanity from the garden. James Ussher, 1581-1656, the Anglican Archbishop of Armagh in Northern Ireland, determined the date of creation to be 4004 BCE, which is notably proximate to this sequence. The contemporary world became aware of Dilmun when researchers interpreted cuneiform tablets from the library of Ashurbanipal in Nineveh, an ancient Assyrian stronghold in present-day Iraq, excavated by archaeologist Austin Henry Layard in the 1840s. Certain tablets contain the narrative of the Epic of Gilgamesh, which recounts a significant flood, a formidable Sumerian hero-king, and his quest for the Tree of Life. In the epic Utnapishtim, the quasi-immortal Sumerian counterpart to Noah, who endures the Great Flood, reveals to King Gilgamesh as he travels from Uruk in Sumer to Dilmun on the Gulf, that the Tree of Life continues to flourish beneath the waves and that a sprig from it would bestow immortality. Gilgamesh plunges into the depths, discovers the tree, potentially coral, linked to immortality, and retrieves a sprig. Fatigued from his toil, he collapses on the shore to rest. Subsequently, a serpent absconds with the sprig, abandoning its old skin as it vanishes into a burrow. This narrative succinctly elucidates why individuals believe snakes possess immortality and continuously molt their skins. A Mesopotamian priest named Sinlay Running, Sin the moon god accepts my prayer, compiled the Epic of Gilgamesh from earlier narratives and legends between 1300 and 1000 BCE. Tablet Essene of the Epic presents a comprehensive narrative of the Great Deluge as recounted to Gilgamesh by Utnapishtim. The epic closely replicates an Akkadian epic from the 18th century BCE, named after its central character, Atrahasis, whose father, Ubaratutu, governed Shurupak before the flood. In Tablet 3 of the Atrahasis epic, Enki directs Atrahasis, known for his exceptional wisdom, to disassemble his dwelling and build a substantial vessel to evade the flood, which the wind deity Enlil intended to unleash upon the burgeoning human populace. Enki directs Atrahasis to build an ark featuring a roof and upper and lower decks, and to waterproof it with bitumen. Atrahasis constructs the ark, boards his family and livestock, and secures the entrance. Enlil's tempest descends, deluging the terrain and instilling fear among the deities. Following 7 days, the flood recedes, and Atrahasis surfaces to present sacrifices to the deities. Enlil is incensed with Enki, yet contends, "I guaranteed the preservation of life." Enki and Enlil concur on alternative methods to regulate the human population moving forward. The earliest iteration of the deluge myth is only partially preserved in the Eridu Genesis, composed in Sumerian cuneiform and dating to the 17th century BCE, during the first dynasty of Babylon, when Sumerian remained the written language. In this iteration, Ziusudra is the heroic figure constructing the ark to rescue his family and animals. The Western world is predominantly acquainted with the deluge narrative through the subsequent account of Noah presented in the Bible. As stated in Genesis 6:6-8, Yahweh lamented the creation of humanity on earth, and his heart was troubled. "I shall eliminate humanity, my creation, from the surface of the earth," declared Yahweh, "along with animals, reptiles, and birds of the sky, for I lament having created them." Nevertheless, Noah had garnered favor with Yahweh. Yahweh commands Noah to construct a large vessel, the Ark, comprising 3 tiers equipped with a roof and to waterproof it with pitch, bitumen. He instructs Noah to bring 7 species of clean animals and birds onto the Ark, along with 2, 1 male and 1 female, of each unclean animal. Genesis 7:11-12 states, "In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, and on the 17th day of that month, all the springs of the vast deep broke through, and the sluices of heaven opened. It rained on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights." Verses 18-19 indicate, "The waters rose and swelled greatly on the earth, and the ark sailed on the waters. The earth's waters continued rising, submerging all the highest mountains beneath the sky." Furthermore, verse 24 notes, "The waters rose on the earth for 150 days." Noah's Ark is situated on Mount Ararat in contemporary Turkey after the waters recede. Utnapishtim's vessel rests on Mount Nisir in Iraqi Kurdistan, a few hundred miles distant. Noah dispatches a raven once and a dove twice. Utnapishtim releases 3 birds, a dove, a swallow, and a raven. Noah's youngest son, Ham, has 4 sons, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. According to Genesis, their progeny became the Cushites, Africans, Egyptians, Putians, Persians, and Canaanites, Phoenicians, respectively. Bishop Ussher precisely dated Noah's deluge to 2349 BCE, whereas the historical reign of King Gilgamesh of Uruk is estimated to have occurred around 2700 BCE, suggesting that the flood was already a distant legend by that time. Therefore, if the Great Deluge did transpire, when did it occur? The epic designates Atrahasis as the progeny of Ubaratutu, the final antediluvian monarch of Shuruppak, present-day Tel Farah, Iraq, before the flood swept over. Radiocarbon analysis of the significant flooding at that location indicates a date of approximately 2900 BCE. The flood deposits reach as far north as the city of Kish, disrupting the continuity of habitation. The epic states, after the flood had swept over and the kingship had descended from heaven, the kingship was in Kish, where Ngushur succeeded as the next king post-flood. A deluge date of circa 2900 BCE aligns coherently with the chronology of Sumerian kings and the narratives in the epics of Gilgamesh and Atrahasis. William Ryan and Walter Pittman, 2 senior scientists from Columbia University, recently proposed a contentious new interpretation of the Great Deluge legend. They assert that elevated sea levels resulted in a significant influx of water from the Mediterranean into the Black Sea circa 5600 BCE. This water, channeled through the narrow Bosporus, flowed daily at a rate 200 times that of Niagara Falls. The Bosporus flume raged and surged at full capacity for no less than 300 days. Daily, the water level increased by approximately 6 inches, submerging 60,000 square miles of agricultural land. The Black Sea underwent a significant elevation of several hundred feet, evolving from a landlocked freshwater lake into a saltwater inland sea linked to the world's oceans. This flooding would have devastated the inhabitants surrounding the Black Sea, instigating widespread migrations throughout Europe and the Middle East. Many researchers currently contend that the narrative of the Great Deluge is rooted in this catastrophic occurrence, depicted in the epics of Gilgamesh, Atrahasis, and Noah. The Woods Hole Oceanographic Institution conducted radiocarbon dating on shells from 9 species of saltwater and freshwater mollusks sourced from the Black Sea. The saltwater species were determined to be between 2,800 and 6,020 years old, while the freshwater species ranged from 7,460 to 15,500 years old. The inundation of the Black Sea transpired between 6,820 and 7,460 years ago. or between 4,820 and 5,460 BCE. Instead of validating the flood narratives of Gilgamesh, Atrahasis, and Noah, this event is temporally aligned with the inundation of Eden caused by the ascending waters of the Persian Gulf during the Flandrian transgression, which commenced after 5000 BCE and attained its current elevation around 4000 BCE. Bruce Mass, an environmental archaeologist at Los Alamos National Laboratory, posits a more radical hypothesis regarding the Great Flood. Mass and his Holocene Impact Working Group assert that a colossal comet, measuring 3 miles in diameter, collided with the Indian Ocean near the coast of Madagascar between 2800 and 3000 BCE. The Burckle crater, the impact site, measures approximately 18 miles in diameter, making it 25 times larger than Meteor Crater in Arizona. Situated at 30.165 degrees, 61.365 degree, it lies 12,500 feet beneath the surface. The impact generated 600-foot-high tsunamis that struck global coastlines and expelled plumes of superheated water vapor and particulates into the atmosphere. Within hours, the explosion generated superhurricanes on the opposite side of the globe. The entire world descended into darkness for approximately 1 week. Mass posits that as much as 80% of the global population succumbed, rendering this occurrence the most deadly disaster in human history. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, Utnapishtim observes a column of black smoke on the horizon before a week of darkness enveloping the sky. Subsequently, a cyclone devastates the Fertile Crescent, resulting in the renowned deluge. Early Spanish explorers in Central and South America were astonished by indigenous flood legends that bore a remarkable resemblance to Noah's narrative. Certain Spanish priests apprehended that the devil instigated the narratives in the minds of the indigenous people to disorient them. Massa states, "These narratives align precisely with what one would anticipate from the survivors of a celestial impact. Solar winds frequently propel a comet's tail forward as it approaches the sun, resulting in the tail leading the comet. This phenomenon explains the numerous mythological depictions of comets adorned with horns." He observes that in India, a celestial fish, radiant as a moonbeam, characterized by a prominent horn on its head, was believed to have forewarned of a monumental flood that marked the beginning of a new epoch for humanity. Mass analyzed 175 flood myths, revealing that a Chinese variant asserts the Great Flood transpired after Empress Nu Hua's reign. By correlating historical records with astronomical data, Mass determined the date to be May 10th, 2807 BCE. Furthermore, excavations at Shuruppak uncovered substantial flooding evidence dated to approximately 2900 BCE, aligning with narratives in the epics of Gilgamesh and Atrahasis. Mass's dating further substantiates his hypothesis that a significant comet impact during that period precipitated the deluge of legend. Ancient civilizations characterized comets as celestial dragons, feathered serpents, heavenly fish, or blazing swords. Consequently, it is noteworthy that in the Genesis narrative of the fall, Yahweh expelled the man, and at the entrance of the Garden of Eden he stationed the cherubs and the flame of a flashing sword to safeguard the path to the tree of life. Genesis 3:24. Approximately 8,000 years ago, a substantial landmass located to the north underwent flooding. This region, now referred to as Doggerland, named after the Dogger Bank, a peril to mariners and advantageous for anglers, extended between England and Denmark, where the frigid waters of the North Sea currently prevail. During the last ice age, Doggerland constituted a vast section of the continental shelf, a broad, undulating plain characterized by a coastline of salt marshes, mudflats, and lagoons, shaped by the winding rivers and lakes nourished by the melting glacial waters from the continental ice sheets situated further inland. Comparable in size to Great Britain, Doggerland may have represented the most abundant hunting, fowling, and fishing territory in all of Europe during the Mesolithic, Middle Stone Age cultural period. Numerous artifacts recently dredged from the North Sea substantiate human habitation during this epoch. Following the conclusion of the last glacial period, rising sea levels and the subsidence of continental shelves led to the gradual submersion of Doggerland beneath the North Sea. At approximately 6200 BCE, a significant submarine landslide off the Norwegian coast, known as the Storegga Slide, triggered a devastating tsunami that inundated Doggerland and traversed the English Channel, isolating the peninsula from the European mainland. This tsunami would have obliterated any inhabitants of this lost territory. The Flandrian transgression ultimately submerged the elevated Dogger Bank, akin to Eden and the shores of the Black Sea, rendering it an island until as late as 5000 BCE. We propose Lemuria, a submerged landmass from Madagascar through India and Indonesia. The zoologist and biogeographer Philip Sclater introduced the term in 1864 to elucidate the distribution of lemurs in these disparate regions. Lemurs, derived from the Latin word for ghosts, are endearingly primitive primates and our distant ancestors. Sclater suggested that Madagascar and India were once components of a larger continent, stating, "The peculiarities of Madagascar's mammalian fauna can be elucidated by positing the existence of a substantial continent that spanned portions of the Atlantic and Indian Oceans. This continent subsequently disintegrated into islands, with some amalgamating with Asia. Remnants of this extensive landmass persist in Madagascar and the Mascarene Islands. I propose the designation Lemuria. The Indian Ocean basin has never harbored a lost continent. During the Ice Ages, when sea levels were markedly lower and the continental shelves were revealed, the islands in this region constituted a contiguous landmass. The present-day islands of Indonesia were formerly part of the extensive region known as Sundaland, which nearly reached Australia. Certain occult authors adopted the concept of a submerged continent in the Indian or Pacific Ocean, positing it as the residence of various fictitious races and beings. In the 1880s, Madame Helena Blavatsky, 1831-1891, contended that deities submerged Lemuria to eradicate its subhuman denizens. In 1894, Frederick Spencer Oliver released A Dweller on Two Planets, which asserted that surviving Lemurians resided in an intricate network of caves and tunnels beneath the surface. Mount Shasta in Northern California is occasionally associated with individuals clad in white robes. A visit to an occult bookstore in Shasta's town confirms this belief's enduring appeal. Mu refers to a hypothesized extensive landmass that allegedly existed in the Pacific Ocean, with New Zealand and Polynesia as its remnants. Augustus Le Plongeon, 1825-1908, initially introduced this concept, asserting that his dubious translations of ancient Mayan texts described this submerged territory, whose survivors were the Mayan Indians of the Yucatan Peninsula. James Churchward, 1852-1936, subsequently popularized the notion of the lost continent of Mu through a series of rather implausible publications. Churchward posited that Mu extended from a location north of Hawaii to the south as far as Fiji and Easter Island. He asserted that Mu was the location of the Garden of Eden, housing 64,000 inhabitants known as the Nakals. This civilization, allegedly thriving 50,000 years ago, was technologically superior to Churchward's contemporary era, with the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, and the Mayans merely representing the degenerate remnants of its colonies. no geological evidence supports the existence of a submerged Pacific continent. The legendary island of Atlantis is the most renowned of all mythical lost civilizations. Scholars have debated its historical existence and location for over 2 millennia, yet they have never conclusively verified it. The Greek philosopher Plato, 427–347 BCE, first referenced it, asserting that his great-grandfather, who was acquainted with Solon, 638–558 BCE, a Greek statesman who learned the tale from priests during his visit to Egypt in 560 BCE, had transmitted it through his lineage. Around 360 BCE, Plato documented Solon's narrative in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias, claiming that a volcano, an earthquake, and a tsunami obliterated Atlantis approximately 9,000 years before Solon's era, or around 9600 BCE. In front of the mouth, referred to by you Greeks as the Pillars of Heracles, there existed an island larger than Libya and Asia combined, from which travelers of that era could traverse other islands, and from those islands to the entire continent opposite the true ocean. Subsequently, significant earthquakes and floods transpired, culminating in a catastrophic day and night when the earth engulfed the entirety of your warriors, and the island of Atlantis was similarly consumed by the sea and disappeared. Consequently, the ocean in that region has become impassable and inscrutable, obstructed by the sedimentary mud produced as the island subsided. Plato, Timaeus, 25d. According to the narrative, the idyllic island of Atlantis, signifying the land of the pillar, was governed by Poseidon, the sea deity. He became enamored with a mortal named Cleito and constructed a palace for her on a hill at the island's center, encircled by circular belts of sea and land, enclosing one another alternately, some greater, some smaller, 2 being of land and 3 of sea, which he carved, as it were, out of the midst of the island. And these belts were at even distances on all sides, so as to be impassable for man. Plato, Critias 113d. Cleito gave birth to 5 pairs of twin sons who became the initial rulers of Atlantis. The brothers partitioned the island, with the eldest, Atlas, ascending as the inaugural king of Atlantis. They constructed a temple for Poseidon atop the hill. The rulers convened to deliberate on legislation, render judgments, and venerate Poseidon. To enhance travel and commerce, they excavated a canal through the land and water rings, extending southward for 5.5 miles to the sea. The populous city of Atlantis encompassed an 11-mile circumference around the outer water ring. Beyond the city was a fertile plain measuring 330 miles in length and 110 miles in width, encircled by an additional canal to transport water from the mountains. The northern plain was encircled by towering mountains interspersed with villages, lakes, rivers, and meadows. The temperate climate facilitated 2 harvests annually. A plethora of herbs, fruits, and nuts thrived abundantly. Vast herds of animals, including elephants, traversed the island. For generations, the Atlanteans led uncomplicated, virtuous lives. However, they ultimately succumbed to greed and power. Indignant at their immorality, Zeus summoned the other gods to decide on an appropriate punishment. Consequently, the sea consumed Atlantis, its inhabitants, and its legacy in one calamitous day and night. The location of Atlantis has been the subject of various hypotheses over the years. Plato indicated that Atlantis was situated beyond the Pillars of Heracles, which is interpreted as the Straits of Gibraltar, thereby positioning Atlantis in the Atlantic Ocean, most likely near the Azores Islands, approximately 900 miles west of the Portuguese coast. In 1882, Ignatius Donnelly posited in his work Atlantis, the antediluvian world, that the Azores represented the summits of the submerged continent of Atlantis. The Azores Plateau, referred to as Dolphin Ridge by mariners, constitutes the extensive base from which these islands emerge. The mid-Atlantic rift encircles this area, roughly the size of Spain. The entire plateau would have remained above sea level during the Ice Age, until a rupture in the surrounding rift released the underlying magma, resulting in a subsidence into the void. This event is estimated to be around 2900 BCE, predating Plato's timeline. In 2007, planetary geologist Peter Schultz and a team from Brown University presented evidence indicating that a comet or asteroid either exploded above or impacted Earth 12,900 years ago, resulting in the melting of ice sheets, igniting severe wildfires, generating hurricane-force winds, and instigating a catastrophic climate change that led to the extinction of mammoths, giant sloths, saber-toothed cats, and other large Ice Age fauna. Over 50 archaeological excavations in Canada, California, Arizona, South Carolina, and Belgium have uncovered a thin black layer of carbon sediment dating to 10,900 BCE. 10 archaeological sites linked to the Clovis culture. The earliest known inhabitants of the New World exhibited the same black sediment. Researchers discovered high concentrations of magnetized iridium, charcoal, soot, carbon spherules, fullerenes packed with extraterrestrial helium, and microscopic diamonds directly beneath the black sediment, which could only have formed from the intense pressure and heat of an extraterrestrial impact. In this scenario, around 12,900 years ago, a comet or asteroid crossed North America, scattering debris along its route and creating the oval-shaped craters known as the Carolina Bays before smashing into the Atlantic Ocean. The impact site is known as the Nares Abyssal Plain. Its proximity to the Puerto Rico Trench triggered the opening of the mid-Atlantic rift, releasing undersea magma and spewing vast amounts of volcanic ash into the atmosphere. The consequent depletion of the magma chamber beneath the Azores Plateau caused the subsidence of that volcanic landmass, which was identified by Donnelly as the original Atlantis. As a result of this impact, the Earth's geographic axis shifted so that the North Pole, which had been in the Hudson Bay, moved to its present location in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. The magnetic pole is still catching up, by the way. During the Ice Age, extensive areas of Antarctica were devoid of ice and exhibited temperate conditions. Certain esteemed researchers posit the existence of Atlantis in that location. In his 1966 work, Maps of the Ancient Sea, Kings, Professor Charles Hapgood of Keene College, New Hampshire, observed that Antarctica is depicted on ancient maritime charts that significantly predate Captain James Cook's discovery of the continent in 1773-74. Some of these maps illustrate coastal features currently obscured by ice. Hapgood posited that these charts were derived from ancient source maps created by an advanced seafaring civilization that existed as early as 7000 BCE and had been replicated over millennia. Hapgood noted that core samples from the Ross Sea region contain pollen, suggesting a comparatively mild climate as recently as 4000 BCE. He theorized that ice completely enveloped Antarctica only following the polar shift around 9500 BCE, which aligned with the conclusion of the last ice age. Schultz's discoveries, dated to 10900 BCE, would amend this assertion. Some have posited that Plato's Atlantis was Antarctica, drawing upon Hapgood's theories regarding a pre-glacial Antarctica and a polar shift after the Ice Age. They noted that the polar continent corresponds with Plato's depiction in the Timaeus dialogue of an island larger than Libya and Asia combined. Additionally, Antarctica indeed exists beyond the Pillars of Heracles, as Plato indicated. Nevertheless, the complete lack of evidence for human structures or habitation in Antarctica undermines the validity of this hypothesis. Some researchers assert that Atlantis is located in South America, citing specific geophysical features on the Bolivian Altiplano that correspond with aspects of Plato's account, as well as the ruins of Tiahuanaco, an ancient city regarded by numerous archaeologists as the oldest globally. Excavations have revealed only 10% of its extensive 400-acre site. Historically, Tiahuanaco thrived as a port adjacent to Lake Titicaca, whose shoreline has since receded by 12 miles and decreased in elevation by 800 feet. The lake diminishes due to evaporation, as no rivers feed into it. In 1980, Bolivian author and pre-Columbian culture scholar Hugo Buero Rojo announced the discovery of archaeological remains 45 to 60 feet below the lake's surface. Polish-born Bolivian archaeologist Hans Schindler Bellamy determined that the Tiahuanaco culture dates back 12,000 years before the present era. Salt deposits indicate that a substantial inland sea occupied the entire Amazon basin during the Ice Age, rendering Tiahuanaco a seaport. However, the 10,900 BCE caused the entire South American continent to tilt eastward, further displacing it westward over the Pacific tectonic plate. The west coast was elevated by thousands of feet, the Andean upheaval, draining the inland sea into the Atlantic and elevating Tiahuanaco to its current altitude of 13,300 feet above sea level. Notably, papyrus reeds, typically found only in Egypt, thrive abundantly along the shores of Lake Titicaca. The indigenous population constructs boats from these reeds that closely resemble those used in Egypt for millennia. Irrespective of the validity of Tiahuanaco's connection to Plato's Atlantis myth, the site indicates a sophisticated civilization during the later Ice Age, possibly equipped with the requisite maritime skills to import papyrus from Egypt. The predominant proposed location for Atlantis is attributed to Greek archaeologist Spiridon Marinatos, who in 1939 asserted that Plato's depiction of the Atlantean civilization and its catastrophic demise closely resembles that of Bronze Age Minoan Crete, situated at the southern periphery of the Aegean Sea. Approximately 70 miles north of Crete lies a volcanic island formerly known as Callisti, the prettiest one, presently referred to as Thera. In 1628 BCE, a colossal volcanic, the explosion 10 times more powerful than the 1883 eruption of Krakatoa in Indonesia, annihilated the island's central region and ravaged the illustrious Minoan civilization. The blast propelled a column of ash and rock 20 miles into the stratosphere, obscuring daylight over the eastern Mediterranean Sea. Up to 100 feet of ash entombed certain settlements on Thera. Massive tsunamis inundated coastal regions of Greece, Syria, and Egypt, while the volcano, obscured from view, manifested as a pillar of smoke by day and fire by night. Exodus 13:21. This event is chronicled in the Bible as the Exodus. Indeed, these occurrences precipitated the 10 plagues that afflicted Egypt and the so-called parting of the Red Sea, which can be interpreted as a tsunami. Marinatos argued that Solon may have misinterpreted the Egyptian hieroglyphs for 100 and 1,000, proposing that the destruction of Atlantis should be dated 900 years earlier rather than 9,000. The accurate date would be 1600 BCE, coinciding with the Thera eruption. This adjustment from thousands to hundreds also correlates Plato's described dimensions of Atlantis with those of Thera. Prometheus, the progeny of Iapetus, fathered the virtuous Deucalion in Achaea, known as Greece. There, he initially established cities, erected temples to the immortal deities, and governed humanity. The surrounding inhabitants refer to this region as Haemonia or Thessaly, Argonautica, 3rd century BCE. According to Greek legend, Lycaon, king of Arcadia, sacrificed a boy to Zeus, king of the gods. Appalled by this cannibalistic offering, Zeus decided to punish the children of the Titans for their wickedness and impiety by sending a flood to wipe them from the face of the earth, thus ending the Age of Bronze. The wise Titan Prometheus, whose name means forethought, ever defying the tyranny of Zeus, warned his 82-year-old son, Deucalion, the king of Phthia, in the southernmost region of Thessaly in ancient Greece. Deucalion then built a large ark, carefully provisioned, in which he and his wife Pyrrha, the daughter of Prometheus' brother Epimetheus, afterthought, rode out Zeus's deluge, which subsequently swept over Greece and drowned all of its other inhabitants. The rivers ran in torrents, and the sea flooded the coastal plain, engulfed the foothills, and washed everything clean. In this legend, no animals escaped. An oracle of Themis advised Deucalion to cover his head and throw the bones of his mother behind his shoulder when the floodwaters subsided after 9 days on Mount Parnassus, Argonautica. Understanding that the oracle referred to Mother Earth, Gaia, they tossed stones over their shoulders, which sprang up a new race of humans, men from the rocks thrown by Deucalion, and women from those thrown by Pyrrha. Their eldest son was Hellen, whose descendants became the Hellenes. His sons were Dorus, Xuthus, and Aeolus, progenitors of the Greek Dorians, Ionians, and Aeolians, respectively. Renaissance astronomer Seth Calvisius, 1556-1615, posited a date of 1516 BCE for Deucalion's flood, while Christopher Helvicus, 1581-1616, a German professor of Greek and Eastern languages at the University of Gießen, suggested 1511 BCE. Most scholars agree that the deluge of Deucalion and Pyrrha coincided with the Israelites' exodus, firmly linking it to the eruption of Thera, currently dated to 1628 BCE. The collapse of the island's center would have produced a 50-foot-high tsunami, forming the vast caldera that constitutes the remnants of the fabled island known as Atlantis. Excavations in eastern Crete in 2006 by Greek-born UCLA earth scientist Kostas Sinolakis uncovered chaotic debris from the tsunami as high as 90 feet above sea level. Plato initiated the debate 2,350 years ago, which persists vigorously today. Numerous contemporary authors have persuasively proposed the location of Atlantis in Bolivia, Argentina, the Bahamas, Mexico, Ireland, Greenland, Spain, and Morocco. Cyprus, Thera, or Antarctica are all plausible locations for the lost Atlantis, particularly as the conclusion of the Ice Age submerged some of these regions. It is conceivable that the original legend is derived from the memories of a global maritime civilization whose coastal settlements were obliterated by rising sea levels, which increased by 400 feet. As contemporary climate change continues to elevate ocean temperatures and melt the remaining ice caps of Greenland and Antarctica, projections suggest that global sea levels may rise by as much as 18 feet by the end of the 21st century, and an additional 200 feet by the year 3000. How many of our existing coastal communities will transform into the next Atlantis? In the 8th century AD, Viking ships departed from their Scandinavian homeland to navigate towards remote territories. By the conclusion of the 11th century, the termination of the Viking Age, their longships had navigated as far west as Iceland and Greenland, south to northern Africa, and east to the Volga River and Constantinople. Nonetheless, the ruthless subjugation of northern Europe eclipsed the global exploration of the Viking Age. The Vikings first observed their elongated vessels off the Sussex coast in AD 773, signifying their arrival in England. In the year 787 AD, 3 Viking vessels arrived at Dorchester. The harbor master and his aides promptly perished while attempting to ascertain the identities of these visitors. The apprehension regarding the Vikings became firmly established on June 16, 793, when they arrived at the tidal island of Lindisfarne, approximately situated on the boundary between Scotland and England. The Vikings ravaged Lindisfarne, a prominent center of Christian scholarship, by murdering the monks, casting them into the sea to perish, or abducting them as captives. During the 9th century, the Vikings launched assaults and gradually seized control of the British Isles and various other European nations, including France, where they arrived in Paris by AD 845. By 900, the Vikings had plundered significant towns and monasteries throughout the continent. Defeated nations would be irrevocably altered, and the remnants of Viking incursions persist in collective memory and folklore today. The reasons behind the Vikings' invasions of numerous European nations remain enigmatic despite extensive speculation by historians. Initial theories concentrated on overpopulation and the necessity to enlarge Viking territory. Despite the abandonment of this proposal, a consensus regarding the Vikings' incursion into Europe persists. Absent from the array of possibilities is the notion that they may have embarked on a quest for their legendary homeland, Walhalla, which, as per their myths, was located to the southwest. Traditionally characterized as a hall, mythology irrevocably associates Walhalla with an island where the gods allegedly bestowed immortality upon its inhabitants. Belgian historian Marcel Mestdagh determined that the Vikings departed their homeland to pursue Walhalla. After years of recounting the same traditional narrative of the Viking conquest of Europe to his students, he discerned a systematic approach to the Viking strategy. They initially invaded England and subsequently France. Mestdagh observed something previously unnoticed by others. After their preliminary conquests, primarily of islands and coastal territories, the Vikings assembled their purported great army. In 866, soldiers transported by boat from Denmark constituted the nucleus of the great army in England. Their objective was to subjugate the principal towns and cities, ultimately achieved in 879 when the army traversed the Channel to pursue their campaign in France. Mestdagh discerned that the movement of the great army across England was not random, but adhered to a specific pattern. They perceived that the landscape, possibly the topography, was directing them. Although it was present or visible then, we lost sight of it. After many years and extensive research, Mestdagh discovered that the elusive clue remained in the landscape, albeit unrecognized. It was an ancient road network radiating from two towns, one in England, Nottingham, and the other in France, Sens. Mestdagh could demonstrate that England's thoroughfares converged on Nottingham, yet the Vikings had yet to discover their desired objectives. Following the conquest of Nottingham, fresh recruits arrived from Denmark, and the Viking army traversed the Channel into France. The same road system was utilized, directing all routes to the French city of Sens, which the Viking Great Army arrived at in late 886. Notably, Sens was the sole city that the Vikings refrained from plundering. A tranquil siege lasting approximately 6 months resulted in its capture. The historical records explicitly indicate that the siege of Sens incurred neither injuries nor fatalities. The inhabitants of Sens had established themselves on the islands in the Yonne River, anticipating a fierce invasion akin to that of other towns upon the arrival of the great army. Certain historians assert that the Archbishop of Sens negotiated peace with the Vikings. However, no evidence supports this claim. In conclusion, the Vikings possess no discernible rationale for suddenly changing their practices. Mestdagh questioned whether Sens, the former bastion of the Celtic tribe called the Senones, elders held any sacred significance for the Vikings? Was Sens the destination the Vikings had sought and ultimately discovered? Could it be that Sens was their legendary Valhalla? Was this the rationale behind their decision to abstain from pillaging the town? The legend of a vanished island was not exclusive to the Vikings. The Celts called it Avalon, while the Portuguese designated it Antillia. Most medieval Europeans were acquainted with the island Wese, often linked to the Irish monk and navigator Saint Brendan, or the mythical land of Lyonesse, thought to be located off the western coast of Cornwall. The Greeks believed in the existence of the lost island of Atlantis, knowledge of which they acquired from Egyptian temples. The island's numerous appellations originated from its initial designation, the island, universally recognized as the same entity. Certain groups, such as the Goths, named the island based on its shape, referring to it as Oyum, meaning the egg. While some may correctly contend that Sens is not an island, the encompassing area has historically been referred to as Île-de-France, the island of France. Should historians find it astonishing that the etymology of a name utilized by millions daily remains entirely enigmatic? The Vikings discovered an ancient and neglected road system in northern France. Mesdag posited that the Romans, celebrated for their remarkable road construction abilities, were the original builders of the road network. Julius Caesar, the infamous Roman conqueror, selected Agedincum, Sens, as the location for his armies, although it evolved into an administrative center only in the late 4th century AD. It soon became apparent that this network of roads, interwoven with a network of megalithic stones, predated the Romans by millennia, long before their incursion into Gaul. The Celts, who migrated from Eastern Europe in the first millennium BC, utilized standing stones and other megalithic structures as boundary markers. The Celts actively employed these megalithic sites, and William Stukeley's 18th century analysis of locations such as Stonehenge indicated that the priestly class, referred to as the Druids, conducted intricate ceremonies within and around these monuments. However, Caesar, during his conquest of Gaul, specifically sought out and eliminated the Druids, thereby guaranteeing the extinction of their knowledge. No extermination occurred in the Scandinavian nations, which were similarly abundant in megalithic sites. Northern Europe experienced a comparatively tranquil transition from the megalithic period to the Viking era. This indicated that the knowledge pertaining to these megaliths endured into the Viking era, guaranteeing that their understanding of these ancient markers surpassed that of the indigenous populace upon their arrival in Europe. By AD 800, when the Vikings commenced their quest for Valhalla, they effectively preserved a vital link to a historical realm. Unfortunately, the Romans and Christianity in England and France disrupted this connection. Consequently, we acquired minimal Viking knowledge, compelling Mesdag to dedicate years traversing the rural landscapes of northern France, documenting megaliths, road systems, and ancient structures, and compiling ancient folklore, all during an era, the 1970s and 80s, devoid of GPS or the contemporary innovation of Google Earth. The endeavor was monumental and ultimately contributed to his premature demise, yet he published his research's remarkable findings. Upon examining the outcomes of his meticulous research, he recognized that this network of roads and megaliths constituted merely a fragment of the narrative. He also uncovered an extensive network of elongated ditches that previously constituted a series of expansive, concentric ovals centered around Sens. This was the inaugural instance in which anyone discerned the significance of these ovals. Historically, individuals utilized the elevated edges of ditches to build roads, many of which have endured and remain operational today. Nonetheless, Mestdar's field investigations uncovered the existence of substantial ditches, frequently still recognizable in the terrain. The integrity of the ditches gradually deteriorated due to sand construction over more than 3,000 years of disuse. Comprehensive analysis indicated that they were, in fact, ditches with elevated margins. Each contained a central depression or trough that likely held water at some point. Frequently associated with rivers, these internal ditches presumably functioned as canals. Segments of the concentric ovals encircling Sens incorporated genuine rivers, including the Marne between Meaux and Chalon-sur-Marne. The fields of archaeology and history still need to thoroughly investigate the comprehensive knowledge held by the megalithic peoples who constructed the numerous megaliths in Western Europe. In the 1970s, archaeologist Alexander Thom made a remarkable discovery. After conducting comprehensive analyses of more than 600 megaliths throughout Britain, Ireland, and Brittany, he discerned a shared unit of measurement called the megalithic yard. He also deduced the existence of a central government, asserting that a headquarters must have existed from which standard rods were disseminated. However, the current investigation cannot ascertain whether this was located in the islands or on the continent. This headquarters may have been Sens. English author John Michel documented his findings in At the Center of the World, Polar Symbolism. Found in Celtic, Norse, and other ritualistic landscapes, it indicated that individuals in pre-Celtic and thus megalithic eras had an exceptionally detailed understanding of the geography of northwestern Europe and were capable of precisely identifying the geographical center of the British Isles. Notably, the Vikings possessed this knowledge as well. Before Michel's 1994 report on these findings, Mestdar had already discerned that an individual possessing an intricate knowledge of geography had established the sacred center at Sens utilizing the cardinal points. The principal axis of this geometric pattern is oriented east-west, traversing the center of Sens and extending eastward, with the core of the road system situated approximately 1.5 miles east of the city. The outcome of Mestdag's investigation was multifaceted. Initially, he identified 64 roads spanned up to 200 miles in both directions. He discovered hundreds of miles of this road network still operational in the 1980s, featuring numerous megaliths and sacred sites. Secondly, Mestdag discerned that numerous names of towns and villages along these routes featured the Mark or Merk prefix, signifying marker. A prominent site is found along the Southern Road, which circumvents the Puy de Dôme, a renowned extinct volcano historically considered sacred since Celtic times, if not prior. The temple at its apex venerates the Roman deity Mercury, referencing the Merk prefix. Is it merely coincidental that Mercurius was regarded as the guardian of travelers on their journeys? The system of 4 concentric ditches necessitated remarkable effort. The circumference of oval Y, the initial and smallest oval, measures an astonishing 400 miles. Oval 4 possesses axes measuring 297 and 370 miles, with a circumference of 1,106 miles. These dimensions are remarkable, yet they remain within human capabilities, especially considering that the Great Wall of China extends over 5,500 miles. Oval 3 is almost discernible on a map of France, even to the untrained observer. Select a map of France and locate the town of Rouen. Trace the route to Le Mans, Tours, and Châteauroux. To the north lies a brief segment between Amiens and Poix. Between Poix and Rouen, a portion is absent on contemporary maps, yet it is established that a Roman road once existed in this area. These ovals are not mere figments of the imagination. They are indeed tangible. The ancient Celtic tribal boundaries align with the ovals and fan-shaped road network centered around sens. Understanding that this megalithic system included standing stones, which the Celts utilized as boundary markers, elucidates the rationale behind the specific placement of certain standing stones. Mesdag discovered a previously lost megalithic civilization. However, did it? Clear references to an island exist, as indicated by the name Île-de-France. However, could this site genuinely be the legendary lost island of Atlantis? Fortunately, Mesdag, as a trained historian, was not dependent solely on this information. It is now established that Solon, having traveled to Egypt and learned of the lost city from local temple priests, recounted the tale of Atlantis to Plato. They supplied Solon with exact measurements, 3,000 stadia, 333 miles, of this island, which Plato subsequently included in his narrative, a segment of an incomplete work titled Timaeus. Notably, oval 4 can be inscribed within a diamond with equal sides measuring 333 miles in length, similar to any other oval. This distance corresponds precisely with the 3,000 stadia that Plato specified as the measurements of Atlantis. However, additional information exists. Plato situated Atlantis on comparatively level terrain between mountains and the ocean. Oval 4 is situated between the Alps and the Mediterranean Sea on relatively level terrain. Plato states that the distance from Atlantis to the sea is 2,000 stadia, equivalent to 222 miles, exactly the distance from the southernmost point of the diamond to the Mediterranean coastline. Utilizing the network of roads, Mesdag successfully retraced the 10 kingdoms of Atlantis, referenced by Plato, determining that the region within Oval Y constituted the Middle Kingdom. In comparison, the territory between Oval Y and Oval 4 encompassed the remaining 9 kingdoms. Proclus, another Greek philosopher, cited a text by Marcellus that indicated the width of Atlantis's Middle Kingdom was 1,000 stadia, which coincidentally matches the exact width of Oval Y. Is it merely a coincidence that a town named Avalon, after the lost mythical land in Celtic tradition, is situated on this very oval? Mesdag also discovered corroborative evidence indicating that the megalithic civilization was Atlantis, originating from the megalithic era. Petitement is a renowned tumulus located around the Gulf of Morbihan, a region primarily recognized today for its over 4,000 standing stones, predominantly arranged in rows in and around the town of Karnak. The tumulus, originating from 4600 BC, is among the most significant yet severely damaged cairns in Brittany. During the initial half of the 20th century, Z. Leruzic, a pioneering French archaeologist, diligently examined and rehabilitated the megalithic structures of Brittany. Leruzic discovered a collection of stones within the tumulus that bore inscriptions on the interior walls. Stone M is an ellipse featuring 18 spokes, conventionally regarded as a solar wheel. Mesdag asserted that this was a map of Atlantis, depicting the 9+1 kingdoms of the vanished civilization. An examination of the carvings encircling the solar wheel substantiated this interpretation, as it depicted mountains to the south, the coastlines of East Anglia and Kent, and the Rhine and Main river systems, thereby indicating that the solar wheel, Atlantis, was positioned in a manner that aligns geographically with Mesdag's megalithic civilization. We uncovered the lost civilization of Atlantis. Constructing this immense and intricate civilization would have required centuries for our forebears. A remarkable network of canals encircled the megalithic city, and the etymology of the term island provides the most significant insight into its configuration. In Dutch, it is eland, signifying eggland, or land in the shape of an egg, an oval. The English term island derives from island, or Iwise land, and Brittany chronicles the tale of the submerged land of Yse. The narrative employs dikes to protect the island from the ocean, and notably, Mesdag discovered precisely those same dikes present. I contend that Sens was Atlantis's capital and revered spiritual nucleus. This is why its inhabitants were considered the Senones, meaning the elders, during Celtic times. Their sacred significance was evident in medieval times, as their archbishops bore the esteemed title of Primate of Gaul and Germany, an exceptional distinction that historical texts have struggled to elucidate. Caesar's decision to position his army in Sens further substantiates the notion of Sens's considerable historical significance. Caesar recognized that the Druids constituted his most formidable adversaries. Renowned for pursuing and trapping them on Anglesey in England, he aimed to silence and eliminate them. Did Caesar deploy his army in Sens as it served as their French headquarters? The notion of sensing as the focal point of the megalithic world appears peculiar when viewed through a contemporary lens of that region's history. The megaliths in Karnak are now significantly more recognized. The tourism industry bears partial responsibility for this issue. In 1880, the Bulletin de la Société d'Anthropologie de Paris released a catalogue of French megaliths. The report indicates that Sens and its vicinity contain the highest concentration of megaliths, 261 out of 509 clusters. Although most of these megaliths vanished by the dawn of the last century due to the advance of civilization and the exigencies of contemporary life, the region surrounding Sens was once replete with such structures. It was the nucleus of an abandoned realm, Walhalla. Archaeologists often perceive megalithic monuments in complete isolation. The immense stone circles of Avebury are located 12 miles north of Stonehenge, arguably the most renowned megalithic monument globally. Nonetheless, professional archaeologists still need to conduct research to identify the commonalities between the two structures, despite the evident fact that the inhabitants of Stonehenge were aware of Avebury and vice versa. Mesdag's research methodology indicated that megalithic complexes should not be examined in isolation, as is common in archaeology, but rather as an integrated entity. This notion is consistent with Alexander Thom's assertion that the megalithic civilization possessed a central headquarters or capital location. We now designate that capital as Sens. This indicates that from 4500 to 1200 BC, a significant civilization thrived in Europe, about which we possess scant information. The term we currently use for its inhabitants, the megalithic peoples, indicates that we prioritize the stone cutting and the associated technology within their culture. Mesdag's discovery revealed multiple aspects of this civilization, comparable to, if not superior, ancient Egypt. Solon acquired knowledge of this city during his sojourn in Egypt. Nonetheless, despite the multitude of publications concerning ancient Egypt, the megalithic civilization of Northern Europe remains predominantly obscure. Absent the endeavors of several Egyptian priests, Solon and Plato, it would have been irrevocably lost to history. Mesdag's research on Stonehenge and Avebury revealed remnants of an oval roadway linking the two locations. The road extends beyond the two locations. Upon examining the map, he ascertained that 2/3 of this oval remain preserved, with its dimensions being exactly 1/10 of those of Oval 2 in France. Utilizing this mathematical data, he could furnish incontrovertible evidence that the megalithic constructors of France were cognizant of their English counterparts. For over 3 millennia in Northern Europe, events transpired according to a grand design that challenges credulity. That is exactly what the lost civilization of Atlantis represented. The ancient Egyptians were aware of the lost civilization of Atlantis. When Solon arrived in Egypt, the megalithic civilization of Atlantis had disappeared. Ancient Egypt prospered during the period of the megalithic civilization, which lasted from 3500 to 1200 BC. In Egyptian mythology, the afterlife was depicted as an island in the west, traversed by canals, and represented as an enclosed oval created by the body of Nut, with Osiris elevated above, holding the solar disk. The Egyptian counterpart of Walhalla was called Sekhet Help, the field of offerings. Egyptologists assert that these myths were fabricated by the ancient Egyptians. An alternative interpretation demonstrates that Sekhet's assistance was once tangible and present in France. Archaeologists previously recognized the communication between the megalithic civilization and Egypt. The Italian anthropologist Giuseppe Sergi recorded the discovery of the Ankh symbol and additional hieroglyphic signs on various French dolmens. Professor J. Morris Jones corroborated Sir John Rees's assertion that Celtic languages retain an Egyptian Hamitic syntax. The pre-Aryan dialects that persist in Welsh and Irish originated from a language related to Egyptian and Berber languages. In 1893, the French archaeologist Le Tourneau observed in the Bulletin de la Société d'Anthropologie that the constructors of our megalithic monuments hailed from the south and were connected to the populations of North Africa. In contemporary archaeological discourse, this viewpoint is largely disfavored. The dominant politically correct stance asserts that all cultures developed independently, dismissing the antiquated colonial notion that no culture could have accomplished remarkable achievements such as constructing the Great Pyramid autonomously. Archaeologists contend that a singular monolithic civilization did not exist regarding the megalithic civilization of Atlantis. Mesdag's material was accessible solely to a Dutch audience, resulting in restricted subsequent research following his death in 1990. Dutch researcher Wim Zitman has examined Mesdag's conclusions and observed that the dimensions of the Atlantean civilization encompassed a sequence of numbers mathematically associated with the star Sirius. Sirius is the most luminous star in the sky and holds sacred significance in numerous cultures, particularly in ancient Egypt. Zeitman posits that the ancients operated under the premise that time equates to distance, an essentially accurate notion, as contemporary understanding reveals the equivalence of time and space, and that measurements of distances between ancient monuments frequently yield figures that align with specific astronomical metrics. He contends that the ancients scrutinized the sky and astronomical phenomena, integrating them into their terrestrial edifices to exemplify the renowned maxim, "as above, so below." The sacred designs of these structures mirrored their celestial observations. Zitman, in his work Egypt, Image of Heaven, elucidates how this transpired in ancient Egypt. Nonetheless, mapping specific astronomical bodies and constellations was exclusively feasible in Egypt. Ancient Greek scientists have traveled as far north as the Scottish Outer Hebrides, home to the Callanish stone circle. The placement of this megalithic structure was intentional, as only at that northern latitude could specific astronomical phenomena, such as lunar events, be observed. Likewise, the archaeologists may have regarded Mesdag's discovery of the radiating road network, which extends from the center like the spokes of a wheel, with skepticism. However, it is neither the sole system nor the oldest, at 5,000 years old. During the 1930s, the French amateur archaeologist Xavier Guichard disseminated the findings of his extensive research on the toponym Eleusis. A city with that name exists in both Greece and Egypt. Among the two, the Greek city is the most renowned as the site of the Eleusinian mysteries. The Elysian fields in mythology are closely associated with the afterlife and are regarded as the Greek counterpart to Norse Valhalla. Eleusis Alesia, an examination of the origins of European civilization, disseminated Guichard's findings. Released in 1936, It had an initial print run of 500 copies, several of which were later lost. In 1997, when I facilitated a friend's borrowing of the copy from Lyon's principal library, it had been more than 20 years since anyone consulted it. Guichard contends that prehistoric eras designated the name Alesia, or variants thereof, to all locations bearing that title. As no location has been designated with such a title recently, these sites must have acquired their names in antiquity. He posited that the name derived from an Indo-European root, signifying a convergence point to which individuals journeyed. France formerly had over 400 locations, whereas Poland, Spain, and remote regions such as Greece and Egypt possessed additional sites. Guichard's failure to identify these place names in Britain implies that these cities emerged during the last ice age, when extensive ice sheets enveloped the region, making it inhospitable for human settlement. Like Mesdag, Guichard prioritized visiting most of these locations personally. He found they all possessed two distinctive characteristics: situated on a hill with a view of a river and constructed around an artificial saline or mineral water well. Upon mapping their locations, he discerned that all the sites were situated along lines radiating from the town of Alès in eastern France, resembling the spokes of a wheel. This aligns with Mesdag's findings at Sens. Guichard posited that 24 equidistant radiating lines, along with 4 lines oriented towards the sunrise and sunset during the 2 equinoxes and the summer and winter solstices, interconnected the different locations. This produced 28 lines indicating a possible lunar connection and implying that our ancestors may have mapped the Earth 12,000 years ago. According to Plato, Atlantis was submerged approximately 12,000 years ago. However, all our information indicates that it concluded circa 1200 BC. Consequently, it is imperative to elucidate the timing, despite the incontrovertible fact that the megalithic civilization of Sens possessed dimensions and location identical to Plato's Atlantis. How should we interpret this? Mesdag proposed that the years mentioned to Solon may have pertained to lunar rather than solar years. If this is accurate, it would result in an approximate end date. 1200 BC, aligning with the data presented by the Egyptian temple priests to Solon. However, we must ascertain whether this is the appropriate methodology. Should we regard Plato's assertions as authoritative, we may investigate various possibilities. An individual required clarification and was mistaken regarding the dates of the Atlantean civilization. 2 distinct legends were created alongside a yet-to-be-discovered lost civilization dating back 12,000 years. The megalithic civilization of Sens was not the genuine Atlantis. The dimensions of Atlantis clearly correspond with those of Sens' megalithic civilization. Unless the analyses of the megalithic civilizations are erroneous, the megaliths of northwestern Europe do not originate from 12,000 years ago. This presents a singular option which must currently serve as our working hypothesis: that the megalithic civilization, a genuinely lost civilization, was created as a replica of another, even older civilization that has also been lost. The primordial Atlantis. Aside from the temporal aspect, all characteristics of this megalithic civilization align with our understanding of Atlantis. The dating of megalithic civilization is conducted indirectly through materials discovered near standing stones. There were 2 separate phases: the original construction, occurring roughly 12,000 years ago, and the later modifications around 4000 BC and after that, during which individuals restored the edifices, effectively reconstructing the lost Atlantis. While we cannot validate this hypothesis, it frequently suggests that the truth exists, poised for discovery. Mainstream science asserts that entities like giants, ogres, and other monstrous beings are mythical constructs from a distant past devoid of empirical foundation. Fearful of an incomprehensible and uncontrollable world, our ancestors created these myths to impose order and predictability on a chaotic, primordial existence. These are the perspectives and findings of academia. However, these narratives encompass significantly more depth. The naive perception of a gullible and uninformed humanity, lacking an understanding of reality, is nearing its conclusion. Archaeological findings indicate that ancient civilizations were remarkably advanced and may have possessed technologies equal to or exceeding contemporary capabilities. The ancients excelled in record-keeping and possessed substantial knowledge in astronomy, medicine, and engineering. Therefore, we should regard these ostensibly extraordinary narratives of titans, frost giants, and cyclopes with seriousness. The ancients possessed profound knowledge. Nevertheless, the fundamental reality of this ubiquitous myth of giants transcends simple ancient documentation. Demonstrating the accomplishments and knowledge of ancient civilizations is essential to validate the existence of historical giants. This inevitably necessitates a discussion of their pre-modern technological accomplishments, some of which are significantly more advanced than our own. Establishing this will enable us to address the issue of giants more objectively. Our research indicates that ancient civilizations were more sophisticated than most archaeologists assume. This assertion has been supported by the discovery of a seemingly insignificant device in 1900 on the small island of Antikythera, located 25 miles northwest of Crete. The apparatus, unearthed by fishermen and sponge divers from the submerged remains of a Greek galley, was in fact a functional computer meticulously crafted by the Greeks during Hellenistic times rather than by Apple or Dell. David Childress, author of Technologies of the Gods, aptly claims its discovery is equivalent to locating a jet airplane in the tomb of King Tut. Indications of additional technological achievements from antiquity have also persisted into the 21st century. Sanskrit texts and intricate illustrations of flying machines known as vimana suggest that entities were airborne above Earth in ancient times. Confucius notes that in China, during the era of the 5 monarchs, from 2852 to 2206 BCE, there existed flying carriages. It is challenging to ascertain the precise technological advancements of ancient China, as Emperor Qin Shi Huang Ti mandated the incineration of countless texts, including those in royal libraries, resulting in the survival of only a select few volumes. The annihilation of the others has irrevocably obliterated the secrets they once possessed. These examples clearly indicate that our ancestors exhibited intelligence, logic, and rationality comparable to contemporary advanced cultures, suggesting a significant likelihood that these legends contain elements of truth. Since their existence on Earth eons ago, giants have ingrained themselves in our collective unconscious as a formidable Jungian archetype that fascinates the imagination. Giants have emerged as the foundation of the myths, legends, and traditions of nearly every culture on Earth. In numerous instances, these narratives have persisted uninterrupted and unaltered for millennia. Frequently, these myths depict a civilization governed by giants that succumbs to a global deluge and ultimately disappears into obscurity. Only myth and legend remain to assist us in unraveling the mysteries of that neglected era in human history. Nonetheless, like all mythological narratives, these represent distorted reflections of a significantly deeper truth. These colossal entities of our imagination are not mere illusions, but rather the cultural remnants of our historical experiences as a species. They are, indeed, vestiges or reverberations of a distant yet tangible dark age that we have long overlooked until now. The Inca myth delineates the Ayar-Luca lineage, comprising 4 twin giants who support the heavens. As in many others, humanity becomes disorderly and unappreciative in this myth. Infuriated by this disregard, the 4 giants consent to allow the sky to collapse and plunge into the sea. The outcome is a worldwide deluge that annihilates a significant portion of humanity. The concept of the sky collapsing onto the earth and obliterating nearly all of civilization parallels Plato's account of Atlantis and contemporary conjectures about its downfall. Certain theories propose that a comet or asteroid may have collided with Earth in our distant past, resulting in the annihilation of these ancient and advanced civilizations. In Irish mythology, the Formarach, a colossal maritime race, is led by Balor, who directs them to the coasts of Ireland after the Great Deluge. They subsequently become the indigenous residents of that island. Some scholars assert that Formarach originated in Spain or North Africa, while others contend that their original homeland was Atlantis, believed to be situated 200 miles west of Gibraltar. The indigenous people of the Fijian Islands believed that their ancestral territory, known as Burotu, was submerged into the Pacific Ocean long ago. The heavens collapsed, annihilating this ancestral domain, and fire and water coalesced to create the islands of Samoa. The survivors, referred to as the Hiti, were regarded as a race of giants, the progeny of Atlantis. They constructed a monumental arch nearly 20 feet in height. Arab mythology depicts a race of giants called the Adites. Greek mythology likens these entities to the Atlantean Titans, portraying them as exceptional architects and builders. Throughout their recorded history, Arabs in the Middle East have linked all monumental edifices to these colossal figures of antiquity. In a Hittite narrative, a giant named Kumarbi, hailing from the Western Ocean, supports the world on his mountainous neck. Thus he serves as the Anatolian counterpart to the Greek deity and titan Atlas, the progenitor of the formidable Atlantean Empire. Bochica is a character in the mythology of the Chibcha, people of contemporary Colombia. A bearded, fair-skinned giant resembling Atlas, he bears the heavens upon his shoulders. When humanity forsakes his teachings, he causes the sky to collapse, instigating floods and fires that devastate the planet. This incident also obliterates the giant's residence, compelling his offspring to escape and find refuge elsewhere. Ultimately, they establish themselves along the coast of Colombia, becoming the indigenous Indian inhabitants of the country. This limited selection illustrates the astonishing quantity and diversity of monumental myths and legends within Earth's cultures. Monoculture mythologies encompass entities closely associated with the Titans, who allegedly once governed Atlantis. Certainly, the persistent narrative of a monumental cataclysm exists, ultimately obliterating a forgotten civilization in the distant past. These prevalent themes and motifs establish a foundation for a more extensive discourse. The Sanskrit texts of India describe the Daitya, or water giants. The Vishnu Purana and the Mahabharata, 2 of the most ancient and esteemed Hindu sacred texts, reference them. The Daitya are the progeny of Vishnu. These aquatic behemoths are the East Indian counterparts of the Titans from Greek mythology, encompassing Atlas and the other sovereigns of Atlantis, Joseph 2005. These texts delineate how Vishnu's mother subjugates the earth for the deities and emerges as the foremost of the formidable Daitya. This ultimately designates her as the guardian of the heavens, personifying what Frank Joseph describes as the moral order of the cosmos. This aligns her with the Greek Titan Atlas, who founded the island of Atlantis and bears the burden of the world on his shoulders. The Vishnu Purana states that these aquatic giants inhabit Tripura, the Triple City. This submerged island metropolis, situated beyond the inaccessible Western Ocean, resonates with Plato's depictions of the lost civilization of Atlantis. The eternal Greek philosopher stated that this submerged landmass was located beyond the Pillars of Hercules in the central Atlantic Ocean. The Triple City of the Vishnu Purana distinctly symbolizes Poseidon's trident, the guardian deity of Atlantis. A parallel to the myth of Atlantis is the annihilation of the Daitya and Tripura in a conclusive conflict. The Greeks possessed their own giants, the gigantes, grotesque humanoid beings characterized by serpentine legs. In the mythological narratives, they endeavor to usurp Zeus and the other deities of Mount Olympus, but ultimately fail. The Greek epic, the Argonautica, characterizes the giants as having 3 pairs of articulated hands resembling paws. The initial pair dangles from their twisted shoulders, while the second and third pairs rest against their malformed hips. The Titans, the earliest known Greek deities, governed the primordial cosmos before the emergence of the Olympians. This parallels the biblical Nephilim, who governed the earth until their era concluded, allowing for the emergence of the human race. Atlas, arguably the most renowned of the Titans, was the sovereign of Atlantis. Illustrations frequently portray Atlas as a colossal, bearded figure kneeling, supporting the celestial sphere on his immense shoulders. Such imagery has come to represent the Atlanteans' unwavering commitment to celestial and planetary sciences. Notably, the Sanskrit term ATL signifies to support or uphold. Interestingly, Atlas also refers to a mountain in Asia Minor situated near the remarkable ruins of Çatalhöyük, potentially the oldest city on Earth, exceeding 9,000 years in age and dating back to the destruction of Atlantis, possibly even to the initial colony of its exiled survivors. The Gigantomachy narrates the conflict between the giants and their primary adversaries, the Olympian deities. This struggle is the most frequently illustrated theme in Greek art and literature. In this narrative, the giants assault the gods with boulders and the blazing trunks of incinerated trees. The oracle prophesies that the gods cannot vanquish the giants without the assistance of a formidable mortal. This individual could only be the legendary Heracles in ancient Greece. In Greek mythology, the giants are not the sole colossal entities. The gods also embody giant-like characteristics. In contrast to the gigantes, these deities are characterized by blonde hair, fair skin, and a distinctly Nordic visage. The historical prevalence of Caucasians, occasionally portrayed as giants in contemporary accounts, aligns with the notion that they once dominated regions previously regarded as exclusive to non-European populations. The Germanic peoples possess a profound mythological heritage with supernatural entities, deities, trolls, elves, demigods, and giants. Consequently, Teutonic myths and legends exhibit numerous parallels with other cultures. For instance, the notable similarities between the Norse god Odin and Ole, the tribal deity of North America's Tualatin Indians, are striking. Like Odin, Ole is a formidable giant adorned with a horned helmet, serving as a god of war and a savior. Ole delivers his people from a fiery demon named Sot. The Norse god Thor is undoubtedly one of mythology's most formidable warriors against the adversaries of humanity: dwarves, dragons, monsters, and other giants. The German scholar Herbert Kuhn has traced Thor to the Old Stone Age, a period characterized by hunter-gatherers inhabiting caves in northern Europe. Thor wields a hammer, which Kuhn interprets as stone, forming the foundation for a novel theory connecting the Iron Age deity Thor to the Stone Age. In Sanskrit, he is referred to as Tanayitnu, meaning the Thunderer. The sagas recount the primordial beliefs and cosmologies of the ancient Norse and other Germanic peoples of northwestern Europe. They depict the frost giants and Jotnar. According to the Eddas, an ancient compilation of Norse narratives, there exist two races of giants, the progeny of Thrud, descending from the frost giant Ymir, and the progeny of Bor, which include the Aesir. Despite their immense size, the Aesir possess a distinctly Nordic appearance. The giants engage in a protracted and seemingly endless conflict for obscure reasons. Ultimately, Odin, Vali, and Ve, the inaugural Aesir, ambush and slay Ymir. Upon the slitting of his throat, reminiscent of the cataclysmic flood, a torrent of blood surges forth, submerging the majority of the giants. Some escape in a vessel to a new domain known as Jotunheim. Ymir's corporeal form constitutes the world as we recognize it Midgard. His saline, aqueous blood transforms into the oceans, rivers, and lakes. His flesh becomes the earth, his bones the rocks and mountains, his hair the forests, and the maggots within his abdomen the dwarves. Nonetheless, it was the subsequent depictions of Aryan warriors and conflicts among giants that became most profoundly embedded in the consciousness of these Western cultures and had some basis in reality. Evolutionary biologists have identified a colossal humanoid species known as Gigantopithecus blacki, which measured approximately 9.5 feet in height. Some theorize that this organism may be an ancestor of the Yeti or Bigfoot. This immense anthropoid ape dominated the forests of East Asia and other regions for approximately 1 million years and has been extinct for the last 100,000 years. The species coexisted with Homo erectus, our direct ancestor before the emergence of Homo sapiens. It is conceivable that our prehistoric forebears encountered the formidable Gigantopithecus and transmitted the knowledge of this creature through an archetype or collective memory. Our concept of Bigfoot may be a fragment of this shared experience. Dr. Ralph von Koenigswald, a Dutch paleontologist and geologist, unearthed over 1,000 fossilized teeth across Southeast Asia, enhancing our comprehension of Gigantopithecus. He initially identified the giant moles in 1934 in southern China. Disregarding their significance in our evolutionary narrative, the Chinese sold the teeth, referred to as dragon bones, as remedies for various ailments. Following the outbreak of World War II in Europe in September 1939, local Japanese authorities apprehended Koenigswald as an enemy alien, halting his research. Although liberated in 1945, the subsequent conflict obliterated much of his work. The archetype of the giant is prevalent from the myths and tribal folklore of primitive aborigines to the revered scriptures of contemporary churches, temples, and mosques. The Bible is one of the earliest and most extensively read texts for comprehending these myths. The book of Job is the oldest in the Hebrew Bible. Job 26:5-6 states, "The primeval giants tremble, imprisoned beneath the waters with their inhabitants. The unseen realm, the ocean's depths, is unveiled before them, disclosing the destruction site." We might interpret the giants here as Atlantis's original progeny, akin to Atlantis's founders, a colossal super-race known as the Titans, an earlier population of immense deities that once governed the primordial universe. Genesis 6:4 states, "There were giants on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God cohabited with the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These became mighty men, renowned in antiquity." King James Version. This specific Old Testament verse represents one of the most persistent controversies in contemporary biblical scholarship. The term giants is a mistranslation of the Hebrew word Nephilim, which originates from the Hebrew verb naphol, signifying to fall. Consequently, individuals frequently envision the Nephilim as a fallen lineage of giants who governed the earth before the cataclysmic flood, the worldwide deluge that submerged the antediluvian realm and ultimately terminated their dominion. The King James Bible characterizes the Emim, descendants of the Nephilim, as a people greater, many and tall. These Nephilim descendants also inherited the antediluvian religious practices and rites performed on Seir, the sacred mountain. This issue remains an enigma that has incited widespread speculation for many. Some assert that the Nephilim were extraterrestrial beings known as Greys, while others argue that these enigmatic figures were the Neanderthals of Ice Age Europe and the Near East. Evidence for the existence of a colossal ruling class of deities on earth can also be found in the Torah. It does not refer to the sons of God, but employs the term Bnei ha-Elohim, the sons of the Elohim, a plural designation interpreted as gods, but literally meaning lofty ones. Consequently, even the most ancient sacred texts indicate a bygone era in which giants, gods, and other extraordinary and supernatural beings inhabited and governed the earth. The narrative of the flood provides insight into the conditions of life on earth before the global deluge. The book of Genesis provides only cursory insights into that alternative historical narrative, sharply contrasting with the prevailing non-biblical evolutionary perspective on history. The apocryphal texts, the book of Enoch and the book of Giants, two recently rediscovered works not formally included in the biblical canon, examine non-evolutionary world history in greater depth and detail. The Book of Giants is a segment of the Book of Enoch that remained undiscovered until the mid-20th century, when excavations at the Qumran caves near the Dead Sea identified it among the Dead Sea Scrolls. This abundant collection comprises numerous scrolls and countless fragments. They facilitated understanding of Old Testament texts and the comparatively recent faith of Christianity. The Book of Giants delineates the antediluvian era. These fallen angels possessed the knowledge of all things. During this period, sin abounded on earth. The malevolent angels slaughtered numerous individuals and engendered giants from mortal women. The subsequent sections of the book resonate with these themes. Likewise, Enoch 7:3-6 references the daughters of men. Upon conceiving, they gave birth to colossal beings, towering 3,000 ells, who claimed all human possessions. When humanity could no longer support them, the giants turned hostile and consumed humanity. They began to perpetrate offenses against avians, mammals, reptiles, and aquatic life, devouring one another's flesh and imbibing their blood. Subsequently, the earth lodged accusations against the unruly entities. In their work, Uriel's Machine, Christopher Knight and Robert Lomas endeavor to illustrate that the Watchers, a faction of fallen angels known as the Nephilim, who interbred with human women and generated the giants that dominated the antediluvian era, were, in reality, constituents of the grooved ware culture, named for the distinctive markings on their extant pottery. Some scholars postulate this culture also gave rise to Western Europe's Celtic and Germanic peoples. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers and their progeny beseech Enoch to advocate on their behalf. All the giants and monsters grew afraid and called Mahweh. He approached them, and the giants implored him, dispatching him to Enoch to advocate on their behalf. They implore the deity of New Grange to rescue them and the world from the cataclysmic comet that induces the deluge. The deity responds, "You have yet to reveal all the enigmas. You are devoid of tranquility. observe that a colossal deluge is imminent, poised to obliterate all. Knight and Lomas posited that the grooved ware culture, renowned in biblical accounts, was aware of an impending catastrophe and sought refuge and salvation exclusively in the Tarim Basin, a high plateau protected by the Tibetan and Mongolian mountain ranges. Nevertheless, they were oblivious to the impending resolution of this enigma. Numerous Chinese archaeological excavations in the late 1980s uncovered hundreds of mummies along China's western border. These distinctive human remains display evident Caucasian characteristics. Researchers have also identified ancient remains exhibiting similar European traits in Mongolia, Siberia, and Central Asia. Researchers have established that although many of these mummies originate from at least 3500 BCE, some are even more ancient, dating to approximately 4000 to 5000 BCE. Alongside their European characteristics, they donned Western-style attire, comprising plaid twill and the earliest documented pair of trousers. Subsequently, carbon-14 dating yielded the most accurate estimation of the mummy's original age, situating them at 3,500 years before the inception of the Han civilization. The evidence suggests their association with the Tocharians, a Caucasian group that spoke an Indo-European language. The prehistoric Chinese remains were largely unknown to the external world until a security breach resulted in the announcement of the findings in 1994. Upon discovering this, Knight and Lomas participated in a compelling debate. Chechen Man, or the David, is approximately 6.5 feet tall. Certain mummies are even taller. According to Knight and Lomas, the Asians who initially documented their interactions with these yellow-haired barbarians likely perceived them as giants. The Tarim mummies, characterized by their robust physiques and elevated statures, may have fostered or incited rumors of giants and unusual yellow-haired populations. They did not, however, dismiss ancient accounts of formidable and imposing entities that exhibited near supernatural or even extraterrestrial powers and capabilities. The Rephaim are a robust lineage of giants. The initial reference to them is found in Genesis 14:5, and in the 14th year came Chedorlaomer and the kings that were with him, and they smote the Rephaim in Ashtoreth Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, and the Amin in Shaveh Kiriathaim. This formidable coalition of kings, prominently featuring Chedorlaomer of Elam, ruthlessly vanquished the Rephaim and annihilated all individuals. The primary objective of the king's expedition was to plunder and seize control of Sodom and Gomorrah. Genesis 14:10 states that the kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and met their demise, while the survivors retreated to the mountains. They confiscated all the possessions and provisions of Sodom and Gomorrah and departed. They captured Lot, the son of Abram's brother, who resided in Sodom, along with his possessions, and left. Chataway observes that in this initial account, there is no evidence suggesting that the armies of Chedorlaomer of Elam and his vanquished coalition of kings were giants. At this juncture, the narrative depicts the Rephaim as one of the many tribes and nations comprising Canaan and its adjacent regions. Nonetheless, the depiction of these individuals becomes more pronounced when Moses meets them in Deuteronomy. Moses informs the Israelites that Lot's descendants, liberated from malevolence, were granted the Moabites and Ammonites to prevent their incursion into Canaan. The coalition of monarchs depicted in Genesis vanquished a lineage of giants called the Rephaim. Yahweh, the deity, designated this task as a precursor to forthcoming events. Most individuals are acquainted with the encounter between David and Goliath, the most renowned giant in the Bible, whom the modest shepherd and future monarch skillfully defeated. In 2 Samuel 21:20, it is stated that David confronted formidable giants in battle. They surpassed the Hebrew soldiers in height and possessed additional fingers. Some elucidate this battle comprehensively, detailing the formidable stature and strength of Goliath and his compatriot giants. For instance, in the 5th book of the Pentateuch, the narrative describes a colossal sarcophagus. The Torah of the Ammonites does not reference the iron bed of Og, the king of Bashan, who persisted among the remnants of giants. Based on a man's cubit measured 9 cubits in length, roughly 8.5 feet, and 4 cubits in width. The Bible recounts what may be the most renowned encounter with a giant. A champion named Goliath emerged from the Philistine camp, standing 6 cubits and a span tall. He donned a mail coat weighing 5,000 shekels of brass. The shaft of his spear resembled a weaver's beam, and the spearhead weighed 600 shekels of iron. Goliath was a direct descendant of King Og of the Ammonites. He expelled the individuals from the vicinity and severed them with saws, iron harrows, and axes. Notwithstanding this, David successfully subdued all the cities of the Ammonite descendants. Subsequently, David and the entire populace returned to Jerusalem. Subsequently, a conflict erupted at Gaza with the Philistines, during which Sibbecai the Hushathite eliminated Sippai, a descendant of the giants, resulting in their subjugation. Another conflict ensued with the Philistines, in which Elhanan, the son of Jair, vanquished Lami, the sibling of Goliath the Gittite, using a spear staff akin to a weaver's beam. War erupted once more at Gath, where a man of colossal size, possessing 24 digits, 6 on each hand and 6 on each foot, was a descendant of the giants. However, when he challenged Israel, Jonathan, the son of Shemaiah, David's brother, killed him. These were the progeny of the giant in Gath. They perished at the hands of David and his servants. The Bible continues to provide some of the most persuasive evidence for the existence of giants on earth, the race of giants hypothesis. Biblical texts offer scholars some of the most culturally and religiously important narratives of giants in European and Near Eastern traditions. Nevertheless, alternative narratives are linked not to the Judeo-Christian tradition, but to the varied cultures of the New World. Nearly all cultures' earliest written records depict formidable, fair-skinned individuals as the principal agents of a vanished civilization. Science writer Terence Aim detailed a sequence of events in 2 unpublished articles regarding the existence of giants in ancient America. He also recounted interactions between European explorers and numerous colossal Caucasian indigenous peoples in Central and South America. The Paiute tribe of contemporary Nevada recounts an ancient conflict against a primordial race of pale-skinned, red-haired giants. The Paiute referred to these formidable Caucasians as the Siteka. This designation pertains to the tule, a fibrous plant the giants utilized to fabricate assault rafts. Tribal lore indicates that this race inhabited North America 15,000 years before the arrival of the Paiute ancestors. Contemporary scientific dogmatism categorically rejects these accounts as mere fantasy. However, there must be more to the phenomenon than mere overactive imagination. Almost every continent has produced physical evidence of giant-sized Caucasian populations. Excavations have occurred in numerous United States locations, including Virginia, New York, Michigan, Illinois, Tennessee, Arizona, and Nevada. In 1924, compelling scientific evidence corroborating the Paiute narrative of a conflict with enormous red-haired Caucasians was discovered at Lovelock Caves in Nevada. In prehistoric times, a vast freshwater lake called Lake La Hontan encompassed the area. The original cavern was situated beneath this extensive body of water, remaining submerged until the lake ultimately desiccated. The Paiute asserts that the giants engaged in cannibalism, analogous to the behavior of early Neanderthals. Neanderthal campsite remnants contain human bones exhibiting artificial cut marks. The Paiute assert they reached heights of up to 12 feet. Though this may be an embellishment of a naturally tall Caucasoid population akin to Nordic stature. Mythology states that the Paiute chased the giants into a cavern. The giants discovered refuge there and opposed the tribe, disregarding their requests to leave the cave and confront the situation directly. The furious tribesmen obscured the cave with foliage and set it ablaze, anticipating that this would compel the giants to emerge. A deluge of arrows swiftly struck the few resolute giants who emerged from the cave entrance. The noxious fumes suffocated those who stayed in the cave, leading to their demise. In 1911, researchers uncovered skeletons and fossils in the region that traced the legend's origins. Researchers discovered over 10,000 artifacts, including the mummified remains of 2 red-haired giants. One individual was a female, measuring 6.5 feet in height, while the other was a male, exceeding 8 feet in stature. These artifacts unequivocally evidenced that the Paiute myth, portraying a conflict with a race of giants, was not mere fiction, but a grim and terrifying reality. Damaged arrows were fired into the cave, and a dark stratum of charred substance corroborated the depiction of the climactic battle scene that concludes the legend. Subsequently, they discovered 2 substantial skeletons in the Humboldt dry lake bed adjacent to Lovelock, Nevada. One skeleton distinguished itself among the human remains, measuring approximately 8.5 feet in height and enveloped in a gum-coated fabric. The other measured an impressive 10 feet in height. The Book of Mormon refers to the original inhabitants as the Jaredites, frequently associated with the Olmec of Central America. However, it is more probable that the Olmec represented merely a segment of a more extensively dispersed population. Ether 1526 of the Mormon Scriptures asserts that they were large and mighty men, as to the strength of men. The 16th century chronicler Fernando de Alva Ixtlilxochitl documented, giants inhabited the region referred to as New Spain, as demonstrated by the skeletal remains discovered in multiple sites. The ancient Toltec chroniclers designated the giants as Quinametzin. While documenting their history, they discovered that these beings engaged in numerous wars and conflicts in the territory now known as New Spain. Significant disasters and divine retribution for their severe transgressions resulted in their annihilation and the demise of their civilization. I contend that a genuine race of red-haired giants once inhabited the Americas, potentially tens of thousands of years before the arrival of the ancestors of contemporary Native Americans via the Bering Strait, approximately 15,000 years ago. In support of this contentious assertion, I contend that race is a variable concept and that the physical characteristics of New World humans during the Ice Age may have significantly differed. They may have belonged to a lineage that left no identifiable descendants. Similarly, the potential for an overlooked Caucasian population in Asia, which may have migrated across Beringia alongside other Asiatics, also exists. This would elucidate certain anomalous findings from recent genetic testing, which has indeed verified the existence of Caucasoid genes in some of the extant ancient remains. Western European explorers, including Magellan, Sir Francis Drake, De Soto, and Commodore Byron, the renowned poet, Lord Byron's grandfather, documented encounters with living giants, survivors of a formerly esteemed and noble race of Caucasian supermen throughout the North American continent. A thoroughly documented observation by Magellan took place in 1520 near the port of San Julian, Mexico. Magellan and his crew encountered a red-haired giant approximately 10 feet tall, whom Magellan characterized as possessing a voice like a bull. Subsequently, Magellan discovered from average-sized natives that the giant was affiliated with a neighboring tribe. AIM notes that Magellan's logs indicate he and his crew captured 2 of these living giants and brought them aboard the ship to return them to Europe. Regrettably, the giants succumbed to illness and perished during the return voyage. Magellan interred their remains at sea. Evidence of ancient giants is prevalent worldwide, indicating lost civilizations and migrations gradually revealed through serendipitous discoveries and the diligent work of independent amateur archaeologists and other scientists. This research has introduced us to an entirely new domain of scientific inquiry. Established academia inexplicably denies their existence. Thus, our responsibility is to challenge the prevailing paradigm and potentially alter our historical narrative. The Great Pyramid of Cheops, situated along the Nile, embodies one of the most significant ancient enigmas. Our knowledge of Cheops' identity and the period he existed is minimal. Experts hypothesize that Cheops began constructing the monumental edifice around 2551 BC. How he achieved this feat is as enigmatic as the individual himself. No artisan, priest, architect, or pharaoh documented even a single word regarding the construction of the Great Pyramid. Like the Pyramid of Texts found at Saqqara, the Pyramid of Cheops has not produced any inscriptions. The structure serves as a silent emblem of anonymity and enigma. The most recognized model elucidating the construction of the pyramids is the wooden sled. Laborers transported the substantial stone blocks on wooden sleds that rested and glided along a wooden foundation. While this is feasible, it is improbable. In this region of Egypt, wood has historically been scarce and continues to be so, as it readily splinters on soft substrates such as sand. This procedure necessitates ropes, yet individuals must comprehend their tensile strength. At what moment would the logs have fractured or the rope have broken? Weighing 3 tons, 5 metric tons? We are also unaware of that. Like detectives at a crime scene, we can only utilize the available clues, reconstruct the hypothetical scenario, contemplate it, and seek potential solutions. Thus far, the most logical solution has been to employ a ramp to position the stones. The building site near the Nile, where boats transported the stones, necessitated a ramp extending 3 kilometers. This indicates that the ramp would have reached a height of 147 meters at its apex and possessed a volume significantly exceeding that of the pyramid itself. Moreover, the slope of the ramp would have remained uniform along its entire length. Constructing steps within it would have been unfeasible, for instance. Every elevation of the ramp's height had to encompass its entire length. The ramp experienced weekly height modifications along its entire length. Some contend that a spiraling ramp encircling the pyramid's sides may have functioned as an alternative to the required ramp descending to the Nile. This is feasible. However, the ramp would have required considerable width to accommodate multiple sleds moving simultaneously in ascending and descending directions. Furthermore, the volume of this ramp would have been considerably greater than that of the pyramids. In addition to the logistical challenges of constructing the ramp and the pyramid, one must also account for the unique mathematical and geometrical measurements and relationships pertinent to the structure. These encompass the following. The 4 cardinal points accurately align with the pyramid. The pyramid is situated at the core of Earth's terrestrial expanse. The meridian traversing the pyramid bisects the oceans and continents into 2 equal halves. This north-south meridian traverses the majority of the Earth's landmass, The Pythagorean triangle, characterized by its sides in a precise 3:4:5 ratio, aligns the three pyramids of Giza. The pyramid functions fundamentally as a colossal sundial. The shadows from mid-October to early March signify the seasons and the year. The dimensions of the stone slabs encircling the pyramid precisely match the length of a day's shadow. The length of each side of the square base is 342 Egyptian cubits, which is congruent with the days in the tropical solar year. The distance from the Great Pyramid to the Earth's center is precisely equal to its distance from the North Pole. The interior of this monumental structure remains equally enigmatic. Only a limited number of passages and chambers, including the Queen's Chamber and the King's Chamber above it, are known to us, and the cumulative volume of these chambers and passages was previously thought to constitute merely 1% of the pyramid's overall volume. What is the rationale for erecting such a colossal structure if it occupies merely 1% of the available space? Waseda University in Tokyo, researchers examined the structure to address this inquiry. The sophisticated apparatus they provided encompassed a device for radiographic examination of the stones. They discovered that, contrary to initial assumptions, at least 3% of the pyramid structure was void. A French team of scientists obtained an even more astonishing outcome by utilizing the most advanced equipment. A minimum of 15% of the pyramid's volume was determined to be void. What additional secrets will it disclose as researchers and the general public continue examining this mysterious structure? Will researchers discover additional corridors and chambers? Will the structure or its walls convey any new messages? Will it ever illuminate our alleged interactions with ancient masters? Certain ancient Arab traditions assert this, however peculiar it may appear. Herodotus is the sole classical historian who attributes the construction of this pyramid to Khufu, Cheops, in his account of Egypt. He acknowledges that this is second-hand information relayed to him by another individual, yet he proceeds to assert that 11,540 years ago, from his era, the gods ruled in Egypt and coexisted with humans. The Egyptians are assured in this assertion based on their own experiences. I have consistently recorded the years. No other historian specifically mentions Cheops or Khufu. Diodorus of Sicily attributes the construction of the Great Pyramid to Chemmis, while Pliny the Elder, despite enumerating the historians who preceded him in discussing the pyramids, dryly remarks that none could identify the true builder. The prominent Arabian geographer and encyclopedist Al-Mas'udi, 895-956, ascribes the construction to an antediluvian king named Saurid. Taqi al-Din, Ahmad ibn Ali ibn Abd al-Qadir ibn Muhammad al-Maqrizi, 1364-1442, agrees. In his work Hitat, al-Maqrizi presents numerous manuscripts and fragments about its construction. Teacher Ibrahim ben Wasif Sah al-Khatib states, in News from Egypt and Its Wonders, that Saurid, a king of Egypt before the flood, was the architect of the Great Pyramid at Misr. Upon the death of King Saurid ben Salak, he was interred in the Eastern Pyramid, Hugib in the Western Pyramid, and Karurus in the pyramid constructed at the base with stones from Aswan and capped with Kadan stones. Al-Maqrizi asserts that the construction of the three pyramids was motivated by the impending flood and that they housed numerous chambers filled with texts about all known sciences before the flood. The builder, Saurid, was the same person the Hebrews identified as Henoch and others as Hermes. Muhammad ben Abdallah ben Abd al-Hakam contends, I believe the pyramids must have been constructed prior to the flood. Had they been erected subsequently, they would have been widely recognized. Nearly every historian who explored ancient Egypt, including Herodotus, Diodorus, Pliny, and Strabo, recounted tales of deities who descended to earth in antiquity and imparted foundational knowledge to humanity. Were any identifiable remnants of these deities and the wisdom they conveyed retained on or within these colossal edifices? Are there any ancient Stone Age structures referencing this bleak era to which numerous ancient historians have alluded? One of these frequently misconstrued complexes is situated in present-day England. Stonehenge is located in the southern region of the British Isles, near Salisbury. The complex consists of massive stones organized in a circular formation, accompanied by outer circles featuring holes and even larger circles beyond that. Stonehenge extends deep into antiquity. Construction presumably began circa 3100 BC. Astute priests, also nascent astronomers, had commenced celestial observations by then. They observed that the moon, sun, and certain stars ascended at designated times. They documented these observations on the ground, likely employing ropes or small stones, as writing did not exist 5,100 years ago. What is most perplexing is that the planners of the Stone Age possessed the capacity for abstract thought. Who were the planners of the Neolithic era, the builders who, despite numerous challenges, possessed the foresight to envision the future? The ultimate question that continually troubles me is, what motivated their actions? Is the entire situation merely a matter of a calendar? At present, we have thoroughly discredited that theory. A colossal arrangement of megaliths is not requisite for predicting or delineating the seasons. We will need help ascertaining the answers to these inquiries. In his endeavor, British astronomer Gerald Hawkins inputted 7,140 distinct potential combinations into a computer. He sought to determine which combinations had occurred to such an extent beyond probability that they were deemed random. Stonehenge proved to be the sole planetary and interstellar observatory. This was later contested. Several scholars intervened and identified deficiencies in the professor's algorithms. Nevertheless, more than 40 viewpoints remained, indicating that the structure sought to pinpoint astronomical reference markers. What function could such an astronomical center fulfill? On June 21st, the summer solstice, the sun ascends directly above the heel stone, a monolithic structure outside the main complex. The sun traverses the gates, increasing in size, luminosity, and brilliance. On December 21st, a comparable event transpires. The sun pauses momentarily between the two blocks before ascending and illuminating the frigid winter sky. The crucial element is the interaction of light and shadow among the monoliths. The Earth undergoes a comparable phenomenon during moonrise and moonset as Diana's illumination envelops it, though with diminished intensity. The priests could readily discern the moon's phases with their unaided vision, illustrating their understanding of these seasonal cycles and the interaction of light and shadow. Additionally, there is another matter. The solar system's fundamental structure consists of the Sun at its center, with Mercury, Venus, Earth, and other celestial bodies following concentric elliptical orbits. The invention of the modern telescope has rendered this model widely recognized by nearly all individuals on Earth. Mike Saunders, an astronomer, observed a conspicuous detail that others failed to notice. Stonehenge is a simplified solar system model. Nevertheless, this rudimentary megalithic model reflects the mean distances between trajectories rather than the elliptical configurations. The Sun is positioned at the center, with Mercury in the innermost ring, Venus in the second ring, and Earth in the fourth ring. The ring of Mars is located at a greater distance. The asteroid belt, comprising hundreds of thousands of rocks, is situated considerably between Mars and Jupiter. The heel stone, positioned farther from the other markers, indicates the distance to Jupiter's trajectory. This is undeniably remarkable and must have been deliberate. Nevertheless, it is improbable that individuals from the Stone Age possessed knowledge of the average trajectories within our solar system. From where did they obtain this knowledge, and what were the intentions of their instructors, regardless of their identities? Dr. Vladimir Turin-Avinsky, a Russian geologist, posits that Stonehenge was an experiment for subsequent generations. In this regard, Stonehenge, similar to the Egyptian pyramid complex, functions as a time machine with an enigmatic purpose. The notion that Egypt is the origin of all wisdom is nearly as ancient as Egypt. Traditionally, every Western philosopher or sage received education in the land of the pyramids and the Sphinx. In Plato's Timaeus, an Egyptian priest conveys to Solon, one of the 7 wise men of Greece, that the Greeks are merely children, arguably the most renowned instance. The same priest recounted the tale of Atlantis to Solon and revealed that Egyptian civilization was 8,000 years old. However, Solon was not solitary. According to legend, Plato emulated Solon. However, others, including Pythagoras, Orpheus, Thales, Anaximander, and Moses, undertook the journey before him. Herodotus, regarded as the father of history, noted that the Egyptians exhibited unparalleled scrupulousness in their religious practices. Their knowledge regarding life, death, and the afterlife was widely acknowledged among ancient civilizations. Consequently, the Greeks perceived a visit to Egypt to uncover its mysteries as requisite, reminiscent of the journey to the East in the 1960s and 70s, or contemporary backpacking among indigenous shamans. Indeed, it became so customary for Greek philosophers and sages to undertake this pilgrimage that subsequent historians questioned the authenticity of their accounts, suggesting that biographers included such journeys merely because they were deemed obligatory. The prevailing sentiment was that no esteemed philosopher would forego such an expedition, leading followers to embellish their credentials regardless of whether the journeys were genuinely undertaken. The Greeks were not the sole admirers of Egypt. The allure of Egypt as a sacred land and a site of enigmas attracted numerous Romans, who sought its concealed secrets, thereby stimulating a thriving trade in esoteric tourism that persists today, as demonstrated by the multitude of travel guides and package tours to enigmatic Egypt available to contemporary travelers. The Romans, regarded as ancient by our standards, perceived Egypt as a realm of profound mysteries, indicating that Egypt has long been considered ancient. It is indeed challenging to conceive of Egypt as young, and its reputation as a wellspring of profound knowledge and wisdom has endured for centuries. Given its reputation, it is unsurprising that scholars studying the history of Hermeticism perceive Egypt as the nearly mythically exaggerated source of all divine knowledge and human religious practices. Such evaluations may be excessively severe, yet for many today they appear warranted. Whether Plato, Pythagoras, and others journeyed to Egypt to uncover its obscure secrets remains a contentious issue. However, it is largely inconsequential. The perception of Egypt as a realm of esoteric enigmas suffered a significant setback in 1822 when Jean-François Champollion, a French linguist, successfully deciphered one Egyptian enigma, the interpretation of hieroglyphics, which had previously confounded scholars. Champollion achieved this breakthrough by analyzing 3 inscriptions of the same text: Greek, demotic, or written Egyptian, and hieroglyphics, inscribed on a stele discovered in Rosetta, Egypt, dated 196 BC. The stele eventually became recognized as the Rosetta Stone. Champollion, proficient in Greek and capable of interpreting demotic via his knowledge of Coptic, the late Egyptian language inscribed in the Greek alphabet, could compare the inscriptions in these languages with the hieroglyphics and decode their significance. However, what Champollion discovered was not the highest mysteries of the divinity, as some earlier scholars of hieroglyphics posited regarding the enigmatic figures and symbols, but rather a dull record, the acts and attributes of kings. The Rosetta Stone, specifically, is exhibited in the British Museum and proclaims a repeal of taxes on specific temples. It is an intriguing enhancement to our comprehension of ancient Egypt. However, it is not an enigmatic discovery. Champollion was not the sole individual attempting to decipher the hieroglyphics. He shares the credit for unraveling their enigma with the Englishman Thomas Young. Young and Champollion, however, benefited from the contributions of their predecessors, such as the French Orientalist Sylvestre de Sacy and his pupil, the Swede Johann David Åkerblad. Ironically, a notable student of hieroglyphics was a scholar who significantly advanced the notion of Egypt as a realm of ancient enigmas and esoteric knowledge. His early contributions were so impactful that numerous modern Egyptologists prefer to overlook his designation as the founder of Egyptology. This is not surprising, as modern mainstream Egyptology firmly dismisses the idea that ancient Egypt was linked to the mystical, esoteric philosophy that the discipline's founder fervently advocated. Athanasius Kircher was a 17th-century German Jesuit priest, scholar, and polymath who dedicated his substantial intellect and efforts to an impressively broad array of subjects, including the study of volcanoes, the mathematics of music, investigations of microbes, and the geography of China. Due to the extensive scope of Kircher's research, he is appropriately recognized as one of the final Renaissance men. He was among the final distinguished Hermetic scholars, advancing and implementing the macrocosmic-microcosmic framework acquired from Marsilio Ficino, Pico della Mirandola, and the Corpus Hermeticum across various disciplines. Despite Isaac Casaubon's prior dating of the Corpus Hermeticum to the early centuries AD, which diminished its authority, Athanasius Kircher, in his extensive publication Oedipus Egypticus, 1652-54, disregarded this conclusion, maintaining his belief in the identity of Hermes Trismegistus and Moses, and persisted in his commitment to the Hermetic tradition. Regarded as one of the final significant dinosaurs in the annals of science, Kircher diligently composed his extensive Hermetic volumes during the consolidation of Cartesian rationalism. However, his vision continues to be exhilarating and frequently motivating for students of more nuanced systems of thought. Kircher exemplifies the Hermetic principle that, unlike any other entity, humanity lacks a predetermined position in the cosmos and possesses the capacity to elevate or descend according to its will. His musical studies convinced him that its harmony mirrored the universe's proportions, an ancient concept originating from Pythagoras and foundational to the idea of the music of the spheres, the celestial sounds produced by the planets' orbits. Although Kircher concentrated on celestial bodies, he upheld a pragmatic perspective. In 1638, driven by his profound passion for geology, Kircher descended into the crater of Mount Vesuvius, which was on the verge of eruption, to examine its interior during a visit to southern Italy. His intrigue with mechanical wonders possessed a hermetic quality. Among his creations, which featured a variant of the magic lantern, a magnetic clock, and a perpetual motion machine, were automatons and talking statues, a concept pivotal to the Asclepius, which elucidates how the ancient Egyptians employed magic to summon the gods into their representations. This account prompted Augustine to denounce Hermes Trismegistus's magic as demonic. The hero of Alexandria focused on the magical animation of statues and images, and it is reported that Pope Sylvester II sought the counsel of a mechanical talking head. Kircher knew Hebrew and Syriac and was fascinated with languages. At one point, he even tried to decipher the mysterious Voynich manuscript. In 1636, he published Prodromus Coptus Sive Aegyptiacus, the first Western Coptic grammar, which he followed in 1643 with his Lingua Aegyptiaca Restituta, which became the basis of all later Coptic studies. Kircher correctly asserted the close relationship between Coptic and the language of Pharaonic Egypt, but his approach to the hieroglyphs was purely symbolic. He became interested in their mystery in 1638 when he read a book on the Sistine obelisk. The pharaoh Menkers erected the obelisk in Heliopolis in 1857 BC, Emperor Caligula brought it to Rome in 37 AD, and Pope Sixtus V later moved it to the center of St. Peter's Square in 1586. Other books on Egypt, like Herwart von Hohenberg's Thesaurus, which contained pictures of hieroglyphics and which Kircher found in a library in Speyer, Germany, intrigued him. But the real trigger for turning Kircher into the founder of Egyptology was receiving a copy of the Bembine Tablet of Isis from Nicolas Claude Fabry de Peresque, a wealthy patron from Avignon. The Bembine Tablet, named after Cardinal Bembo, who acquired it following the 1527 sack of Rome by Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, is officially regarded as having Roman origin and is currently housed in the Museum of Antiquities in Turin. Composed of bronze, silver, gold, copper, and enamel inlay, the tablet features the Egyptian goddess Isis, flanked by stylized Egyptian figures and symbols, including the god Thoth, depicted in various hieratic and ritual postures. It is recognized as a significant example of ancient metallurgy. While most Egyptologists interpret it as a reflection of a decadent Roman intrigue with Egyptian mystique, potentially suggesting its use at an Isis worship site, the prevailing view is that the hieroglyphics inscribed on it lack substantive meaning. This situation parallels a Kabbalah student, devoid of Hebrew knowledge, embellishing a tablet with Hebrew letters that appear mysterious to the unacquainted observer due to their distinctive shapes. Kircher's translation of hieroglyphics was unfortunately based on the Bembine tablet, and following Champollion's decipherment of the Rosetta Stone, his interpretations were deemed nonsensical. A commonly referenced example of Kircher's inaccuracies is the hieroglyphics DWSR, which translates to Osiris says. Kircher's symbolic interpretation suggested that Typhon's treachery culminates at Isis's throne, while Anubis's vigilance protects the essence of nature. He also posited that the ancient Egyptian language was the original tongue of Adam and Eve. However, while it is easy to dismiss Kircher as an authority on esoteric Egypt, it is equally important to acknowledge his notable contributions, particularly given that, as his biographer Jocelyn Godwin points out, he lacked access to the Rosetta Stone or a comprehensive corpus of hieroglyphic inscriptions for analysis. Many available sources were either late, corrupted, or fundamentally meaningless. Nevertheless, more than merely exemplary materials are needed to comprehensively elucidate Kircher's symbolic methodology. He adhered to a long-established tradition of interpreting Egypt, especially its hieroglyphics, through a symbolic framework. Horopollon, a 4th century Greek grammarian, posited that hieroglyphics constituted a form of picture writing, asserting that any prospective interpreter should seek symbolic significance. In On the Mysteries, the Neoplatonic philosopher Iamblichus asserted that the Egyptian characters were not created arbitrarily or thoughtlessly, but with considerable ingenuity emulating nature, contending that their creators mirrored the essence of the universe and the divine act of creation by crafting symbolic representations of enigmatic, occult, and intangible meanings. Based on the authority of numerous scholars preceding him, Kircher asserted that Hermes Trismegistus had devised hieroglyphics to encapsulate his understanding of the cosmos and the divine. Kircher exhibited a remarkable intuitive affinity for these enigmatic symbols, which he found captivating. During construction excavations in Rome in 1666, he was requested to translate the hieroglyphics on a fractured obelisk. He successfully translated the 3 visible sides, but the 4th side remained concealed by the ground upon which the obelisk lay. Kircher meticulously transcribed what he anticipated would be inscribed on the concealed side, and upon the obelisk's elevation, his predictions were unequivocally validated. Historically, Pope Innocent X commissioned the restoration of a toppled obelisk in the Palazzo Pamphili, to which he appended additional hieroglyphics. Had Kircher been present to observe Champollion's revelations, one might surmise he would concur with Manly P. Hall's admonition that a significant portion of Egyptian literature is enigmatic. Its authentic meaning was likely obscure even to the Egyptians during the Ptolemaic era. Consequently, we should not be overly assured of the precision of our translations. Acknowledging that beneath the superficial illumination of our limited understanding lies a Stygian darkness more profound than Egypt's night. This does not constitute a dismissal of Champollion's and other Egyptologists' established interpretations and contributions. Rather, it explores the possibility that Kircher may have discerned something beyond a significant linguistic error, akin to the notion that alchemy transcended the mere missteps of amateur practitioners who inadvertently paved the way for chemistry, if we accept the assertion by esoteric scholar Arthur Versluis that the primary impediment to our comprehension of the Egyptian tradition is the contemporary inability to think analogically. Then it follows that the hieroglyphics, which fascinated Kircher and many others, may still harbor undiscovered enigmas. Kircher firmly believed in this notion. In Oedipus Aegyptiacus, he articulated that a symbol serves as a notation representing an esoteric mystery. It directs our soul by mirroring the intellect of entities distinct from sensory objects. Kircher posited that the enigma at the heart of Egypt was the Prisca Theologica, inherited by Ficino from Gemistos Plethon, which Kircher and others still contended was encapsulated in the writings of the thrice great one. Kircher was among the final proponents of this concept, as evidenced in the pages of Oedipus Aegyptiacus. He posited that the world's religions originated in Egypt, a notion underscored by the authorities cited on the title page of his magnum opus. He asserted that Egyptian wisdom, Phoenician theology, Chaldean astrology, Hebrew Kabbalah, Persian magic, Pythagorean mathematics, Greek theosophy, mythology, Arabian alchemy, and Latin philology all emerged from Egypt's fertile origins, and Kircher sought insights from these disciplines to decipher the enigma of Egypt's mystical script. Of course, this approach was premature. If the world's major religions did not originate in Egypt, seeking their understanding of the hieroglyphics would be futile. This possibility, however, was one Kircher didn't consider. And having determined that the hieroglyphics by definition contained deep philosophical wisdom, which is what the term hieroglyph or sacred carving means, he looked to what he could gather about Egyptian philosophy to understand what they might be saying. In the process, as Jocelyn Godwin points out, he restated the entire canon of ancient theology, making Oedipus Aegyptiacus a kind of one-stop shop of the perennial philosophy, spelling out the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus, Zoroaster, Orpheus, Plato, Pythagoras, and many more. In this sense, whatever we may think of his reading of the hieroglyphics, Kircher's huge work remains a storehouse of primal wisdom, a vast repository well overflowing with the divine knowledge of which the thrice vast repository one was the essential source. Only a subset of individuals believed that Kircher's utilization of the Bembine tablet was merely ornamental or a blatant forgery. For the 19th century French occultist Eliphas Lévy, the Bembine tablet represented a crucial key to the ancient Book of Thoth, a designation that Levi and others attributed to the tarot deck. Levi was not solitary in this conviction. Among his supporters was W. Westcott, co-founder of the esteemed Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn, the most renowned magical society of contemporary history. Others held a more profound interpretation of the tablet's significance. Thomas Taylor, the 19th century English Neo-Platonist, was the inaugural translator of Plato's complete works into English. His translations of Proclus, Porphyry, and Iamblichus impacted figures such as William Blake and Ralph Waldo Emerson. Taylor posited that the Isaac Table tablet was integral to the ancient Egyptian mysteries. He contended that this tablet functioned as the altar during Plato's initiation into the greater mysteries, which occurred in an underground chamber beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza at the age of 49. Taylor informs us that the divine Plato stood before the altar, where the ceremony of the mysteries ignited and awakened what was inherently his, presumably his spiritual knowledge. After 3 days in the Great Hall, the Hierophant of the Pyramid received Plato and conveyed the highest esoteric teachings, each with a symbolic interpretation. Taylor claims that Plato remained in the pyramid for an additional 3 months, following in the footsteps of Pythagoras and Orpheus, to fulfill the tasks of the Great Order. Taylor is among those who contend that Greek philosophers traveled to Egypt. However, not all concur that the account of Plato's initiation is purely fictional. In his work, Plato, Shamanism, and Ancient Egypt, Jeremy Nadler posits that there is compelling justification to believe that Plato and his contemporaries indeed journeyed to Egypt and underwent some form of initiation. Nadler claims that Plato's expedition to Egypt significantly influenced his philosophy, which, as previously noted, serves as a mere footnote to all subsequent Western thought, suggesting the necessity for a discourse on the Egyptian roots of Western philosophy. While the specifics of what Plato and others received may remain ambiguous, Nadler argues that by exploring Plato's connection to Egypt, we can better understand both Plato's concepts and the profound intellectual and spiritual tradition known as the Hermetic tradition. Nadler convincingly posits that ancient Egyptian spiritual practices incorporated elements of shamanism. He draws parallels between dismemberment motifs in shamanic initiation rituals and the central narrative of Egyptian mythology, specifically Osiris's dismemberment by his malevolent brother Set and subsequent resurrection by his consort Isis. Furthermore, he contends that shamanic rituals encapsulate the concept of spiritual ascent, a recurring theme in Egyptian beliefs, and the soul's journey through the underworld, referred to as the duat in the Book of the Going Forth by Day. In both shamanic and Egyptian religious narratives, this ascent to the heavens is facilitated by wings or a ladder, a notion that resonates with the Hermetic idea of a journey through the planets to the eighth sphere. Plato also articulated a variant of this celestial ascent, leading Nadler to suggest that his interpretation and the Hermetic perspective originate from a common source. Predictably, Nadler's ideas put him in the Kircher camp, as most mainstream Egyptologists reject the notion of Egyptian shamanism. Nadler posits that their rejection stems from their obsession with the funerary interpretation of Egyptian religious texts, including the Egyptian Book of the Dead. Like the Tibetan Book of the Dead, The Egyptian Book of the Dead is a collection of hymns, spells, incantations, magical power words, and instructions to guide the deceased soul in the afterworld. Unlike the Tibetan Book of the Dead, however, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is much older, is an often wildly heterogeneous assembly of writings gathered over millennia, and is not a book at all, at least not in the modern sense. Its earliest chapters, known as the pyramid texts, were written on the walls of the tombs of the pharaohs, circa 2350–2175 BC, but originated in sources much earlier. The practice of mummification and concern for the afterlife can be dated to at least 3100 BC, and according to the occult scholar Lewis Spence, an inscription on the sarcophagus of Queen Khenem-Nefert of the 11th dynasty, circa 2500 BC, states that a chapter of the Book of the Dead was discovered in the reign of Hosep-Ti, the fifth king of the first dynasty, who flourished about 4266 BC. Notwithstanding Spence's assertion, it is irrefutable that the content of the Book of the Dead is at least 5 millennia old. Subsequent sections, dating to approximately 1700 BC, originated from the coffin texts, inscriptions found on wooden coffins or in scrolls interred with the deceased. Although initially exclusive to pharaohs, this rudimentary guide to the afterlife gradually became accessible to anyone capable of hiring a scribe for transcription. The Papyrus of Ani, a rendition of the Book of the Dead by the scribe Ani around 1240 BC, is the most renowned variant. It includes the iconic depiction of the deity Anubis weighing Ani's heart against the scale of Ma'at, the goddess of justice. Later iterations featured blank spaces for the names of living individuals. What began as a privilege for the elite and the spiritual rebirth linked to the underworld journey evolved into a more egalitarian practice over time. Nadler posits that the Book of the Dead served a funerary function and a more fundamental role as a manual for practicing dying. This method facilitates the experience of the soul's separation from the body, typically occurring only at physical death while still alive. He contends that this aligns with Plato's philosophy, particularly in the Phaedo, which asserts that philosophy is a preparation for death. Nadler suggests that rather than merely adopting a prevalent idea, Plato may have acquired this concept directly from the priests at Heliopolis. The notion of the immortality of the nous, contrasted with the body's mortality and decay, is a recurring theme in the Hermetic texts, indicating that both the corpus hermeticum and Platonic philosophy may have originated from a shared source, rather than one merely repackaging the other, as some have claimed. The religious concepts of ancient Egypt are intricate and frequently appear paradoxical, featuring deities manifesting in various forms and the simultaneous veneration of new gods alongside established ones. Creation myths, for instance, differ and frequently appear to stem from rival priesthoods contending for dominance. It is comprehensible that reading the Book of the Dead, with its numerous demons and monsters that the soul must confront, may create the impression that the Egyptians were morbid and superstitious. Nonetheless, the ostensibly paradoxical essence of the Book of the Dead can unveil an alternative viewpoint when analyzed symbolically, as the Egyptians might have interpreted it, if, as R.T. asserts. Rundle Clark, an Egyptologist with a comprehensive viewpoint, observes that it has come to be recognized that Egyptian art is predominantly symbolic. This can be further elaborated by stating that for these profoundly God-conscious individuals, their myths were also symbolic. Rundle Clark contends that the Egyptians employed their myths to articulate their understanding of natural phenomena and the ultimately ineffable truths of the soul, contrary to the views of certain conventional Egyptologists who characterize them as superstitious individuals believing in animal-headed gods. Nevertheless, the general populace may have possessed rather simplistic notions regarding religion, akin to some Christians who may still perceive God as an older man with a white beard seated on a throne. The Egyptians employed myths and symbols to convey concepts. Rundle Clark indicated that they focused on two primary themes: elucidating the universe's structure in Genesis and detailing the origin and evolution of consciousness. This second theme will be our primary focus. One of the most intricate facets of Egyptian religion is their concept of the soul, or more accurately, the physical and non-physical elements that constitute a human being. The Egyptians believed that humans consist of 9 distinct yet interconnected entities, each possessing a unique afterlife. Mummification preserves the corporeal form, referred to as the Khat post-mortem. The Ka is an astral double that resides within the body during life, but is liberated upon death, capable of inhabiting other forms, such as statues or representations of the deceased. The bar represents the soul, inner identity, or consciousness. The Sekhem is a life force in theosophical context. It can be referred to as the etheric body, which animates the matter of the Khat. The Ab signifies a person's moral awareness, the Sahu denotes intellect and volition, and the habit is a form of shadow akin to the K yet distinct from it. The Egyptians regard the Akh as an essential component of the soul. This is our celestial essence, an immutable spiritual entity capable of transcending the terrestrial realm, residing among the stars and potentially surpassing them. The deities compare the Akh, from which we gained divine insight and wisdom, to other aspects constrained by specific limitations. Consequently, in our essence, we are, in fact, deities ourselves. Typically, representations of the Ba illustrate a bird with a human head hovering above the corpse. To contemporary observers, these illustrations evoke descriptions of out-of-body experiences, implying that the portrayed body may not be deceased. The human-headed bird symbolized the Egyptians' conviction that the soul inhabited the head, a notion they shared with the Greeks, and that it could transcend the body, indicating its detachment from it. Nadler asserts that the concept of the Ba was not a widespread belief, as most Egyptologists contend, but was exclusive to the priests. It constituted an element of esoteric rather than exoteric religious doctrine. He can detach from the body not only during sleep or at death, but also in a third state, such as trance or profound relaxation. Nadler contends that the primary prerequisite for the Ba to transcend the corporeal form was the cessation of the psychophysical organism. He asserts that the Ba is only effective when the body is inactive and inert. This parallels Hermes Trismegistus's condition when he attained gnosis from Poimandres. Nadler asserts that for the ancient Egyptians and Greeks, consciousness was not exclusively situated in the brain as it is for us. For the Egyptians and Greeks, consciousness manifested in diverse forms, residing in various body parts. Nadler references Homer's epics, the Iliad and the Odyssey, delineating the locus of waking consciousness in the chest and the distribution of other consciousness forms throughout the limbs, heart, and hands. This implies that the Homeric Greeks did not view the body as a singular entity, but as a collection of distinct components, each possessing its own consciousness. Nadler observes that the Greeks lacked a singular term for the living body, typically referencing it in the plural, while soma, denoting body, in our understanding, pertains to a corpse. Although the Egyptians shared the concept of a multiple bodily consciousness with the Greeks of Homer's epics, their conception of the soul, or psyche, diverged significantly from that of the Greeks. For the ancient Greeks, the psyche resembled our contemporary conception of a ghost, an ethereal wraith or eidolon, a tenuous representation of the deceased that is liberated upon death and possesses a diminished existence in the underworld, as Ulysses discovered during his journey there. The deceased Ulysses encountered appeared like vapors ascending from a swamp, yearning to return to life. When we refer to someone as a shadow of their former self, we echo the early Greeks' perception of the soul. Physical reality was paramount for these Greeks, rendering any afterlife unsatisfactory and insubstantial. For the Egyptians, the Ba possessed a more concrete existence, symbolically denoting a purely spiritual essence. While the body was engaged, its sounds and needs obscured the Ba. However, the Ba could be perceived when the body ceased its activity. To consciously experience the Ba while awake, one must withdraw consciousness from the limbs and internal organs, focus it, and consolidate it into a singularity in the head, a process akin to the divine concentration of consciousness articulated by Hermes to Asclepius. Before attaining the knowledge of God, one must acquire other forms of knowledge. The Ba may be roused through the consolidation of spiritual energies and the stilling of the physical form, enabling the I to perceive itself as a distinct entity unbound by corporeal constraints. As the Ba embodies our intrinsic self and identity, this awakening facilitates a direct acknowledgement of our autonomy from the body, which we usually associate with our identity. While we reside within a physical form, during these moments of deep relaxation and focused introspection, we understand that we are not synonymous with it. One consequence of recognizing the Ba's independence is that consciousness can exist autonomously from a physical body and brain, suggesting it is not inherently vulnerable to corporeal deterioration. In other words, a segment of our being is not subject to mortality. However, paradoxically, one must practice dying to attain this understanding. Nadler posits that this was a fundamental aspect of the Egyptian mysteries, or at least one of them, and considering the scant information available about the Eleusinian and Orphic mysteries of Greece, he may indeed be correct. The Greek historian Herodotus, who claims to have observed the Egyptian mysteries at Sais, is frustratingly reticent, ultimately choosing to remain silent after arousing our curiosity. Nadler posits that following his initiation, Plato transformed these concepts into his own philosophical framework, with dialogues such as the Cratylus, the Phaedo, the Phaedrus, and the Republic incorporating significant aspects of the Egyptian mysteries. The Corpus Hermeticum similarly encompasses these elements. A key notion is the belief that the soul, or Be, can exist independently of the body. To attain this state, one must practice death, which paradoxically regards the body as a type of tomb. In the Cratylus, Plato asserts that the body, soma, is the tomb, siema, of the soul, which may be perceived as interred in our current existence. Nadler posits that Plato's attribution of this knowledge to the Pythagoreans strongly indicates its Egyptian origins, as tradition holds that Pythagoras also studied in Egypt. Book 7th implies that the authors of the Corpus Hermeticum may have shared a common instructor, or at least assimilated similar teachings, as it states that the seeker of gnosis must shed the garment of the body, described as the sentient corpse and portable tomb. In this context, in the Phaedo, Socrates proclaims that True philosophers practice dying, and Nadler contends that the Egyptian Book of the Dead addresses the concept of dying not merely in the literal sense advocated by its funerary proponents. Nadler identifies an additional Egyptian concept within Plato, also found in the Hermetic texts, the ark. The ark represents our divine inner essence, capable of transcending terrestrial and cosmic constraints and bestowing divine wisdom and insight. Comprehending the Ba's autonomy from the corporeal form facilitates an understanding of the Akak, which the Egyptians regarded as radiant and linked to the sun, ultimately finding its place among the stars post-mortem or through ritualistic mysteries. Nadler argues that the Akh found its equivalent in Plato's philosophy in the form of the daimon, or as Plato sometimes refers to it, nous. When an Egyptian realizes or becomes Akh, he is filled with divine wisdom and can become a conscious cosmic star. For Plato, the philosopher who came to know the form of the good, the highest knowledge possible, also rose to the stars. From this perspective, Plato asserts in the Phaedrus that he stands on the back of the universe and perceives through nous, not his senses, the unmanifest reality behind or before the cosmos. Nadler posits that an illustration from Ramses III's tomb, depicting the pharaoh gazing beyond the stars while standing on two entwined serpents encircling the cosmos, exemplifies Plato's notion of standing on the back of the universe. The parallels between these concepts and the Hermetic ascent to the eighth and ninth spheres are apparent, and in the Asclepius, Hermes Trismegistus informs his disciples that there is a place beyond heaven where there are no stars. Another facet of Egyptian religion that has influenced Plato's philosophy and the Hermetic texts is the duat, the term the Egyptians used for the spirit realm. While frequently depicted as an underworld associated with the afterlife, the duat also encompasses an overworld and before life. Unlike the Christian concept of hell, the duat is not inherently a site of punishment or torment, nor does it resemble the shadowy domain of the deceased in Homeric tradition. However, it is indeed a perilous realm where judgment occurs. Although it is characterized as the destination of all that is old and worn out, it simultaneously functions as the origin of all that is fresh and new. It contains all the forms that belong to the past or the future, and in this sense, Nadler argues, it is more like Plato's world of archetypal forms. Thus, by studying philosophy, which for Plato and his followers was not, as it is today, a circumscribed academic exercise, but more like a transformational path, one could enter the spirit world while still living. But the duat is similar to Jung's collective unconscious. The Akashic record of Madame Blavatsky and Rudolf Steiner, the astral light of the occult philosopher Eliphas Levi, or the pleroma of the Gnostics. I would also add that it is equivalent to the non-temporal realm accessed through the Hermetic gnosis, the source of the infinite significance P.D. Ouspensky saw in an ashtray during his experience of cosmic consciousness. And on a more immediate, physical level, the brain's total recall that the neuroscientist Wilder Penfield discovered while operating on a patient and the novelist Marcel Proust triggered while tasting a biscuit dipped in tea. If advocates of the Egyptian mysteries are accurate, two methods existed to experience the duat. One method, physical death, was inevitable. Entering the duat unprepared could result in severe repercussions, but it was a risk one might take. This underscored the allure of the second method. Through the mysteries, through the initiation into the duat by experiencing a form of death while still alive, one could attain the status of ache, align with the divine, acquire gnosis, and transcend the fear of corporeal demise. This constituted the essential objective of the Book of the Dead. Although the Book of the Dead is a complex compilation of occasionally contradictory texts, an inevitable consequence of its antiquity, and the Egyptian tendency to preserve ancient works, two primary narratives concerning the Duat emerge from the extensive material. We have previously examined the narrative of Osiris, wherein his brother Set orchestrated his demise and dismemberment, and how his sister and consort Isis resurrected him to assume the role of the Lord of the Underworld. Osiris adherents believed that post-mortem they would reunite with him in Sekhet Hetepet, the happy fields, where they would experience an enhanced version of their earthly existence. However, to attain Sekhet Hetepet, one was required to place one's heart, or ab, on the scales of Maat, the goddess of order, and measure it against a feather. Amenet, a crocodile-headed entity, would consume one's soul if deemed burdensome with sin, whereas Horus, the progeny of Osiris, would escort one to the blissful realms if found equal to the feather of Maat. Another Duat narrative featured the sun god Ra, who was thought to traverse the sky in his bark from east to west during the day. At sunset, he descended into the western lands below the horizon and entered the Duat. There, alongside his divine entourage, he continued his journey through the perilous waters of the Duat, where he confronted the demon Apophis, Apep, a serpent or dragon-like entity symbolizing chaos and malevolence. Ra segmented his voyage into 12 hours, each presenting distinct challenges and trials, culminating in his re-emergence in the east, rejuvenating the day and bestowing life and light upon the land. Over time, Apophis allied with Set, the adversary of Osiris, who subsequently allied with the Greek monster Typhon, whom Hermes Trismegistus defeats in certain narratives. Typhon, akin to Apophis, is also a reptilian foe. This implies that consciousness or gnosis is perpetually engaged in a conflict against primordial chaos, analogous to the cerebral cortex contending with the ancient brain. Ra, the sun god and source of light and life, vanquishes Apophis, the embodiment of primordial chaos, reenacting the original creation myth, which asserts that the positive realm of light and form emerged from the indefinite watery void of the timeless night. The original creation myths and Ra's triumph over Apophis illustrate the emergence of self-awareness from the unconscious, clearly resembling Poimandra's creation narrative. The Egyptian mysteries integrated aspects of the Osiris and Ra stories into rituals that guided the initiate into the Duat, where they confronted essential trials to awaken their Ak and realize their divine and eternal identity while still alive. This process enabled the initiate to comprehend their true nature and diminish the fear of physical death. The trials encountered in the Egyptian mysteries later found expression in the initiatory rituals of Freemasonry. R.A. Schwaller de Lubitsch, a contemporary scholar of ancient Egypt, posited that hieroglyphics and the entirety of Egyptian culture should be interpreted symbolically, asserting that its rituals and mysteries were designed to facilitate a transformation of consciousness. I have documented Schwaller de Lubitsch's life and contributions in my book, A Secret History of Consciousness. Here, I intend to concentrate on his perspectives regarding the type of consciousness he attributed to the ancient Egyptians, which appears strikingly analogous to that depicted in the Corpus Hermeticum. The Egyptians posited that consciousness was not confined to the cranium. In addition to the cerebral consciousness associated with reason and logic, Schwaller de Lubitsch contended that they acknowledged an alternative form of consciousness termed the intelligence of the heart. Through a series of rigorous yet enlightening texts, Schwaller de Lubitsch examined the significance of this intelligence of the heart and arrived at conclusions that resonate with numerous insights found in the Hermetic writings, implying that the wisdom of Hermes Trismegistus may have originated from a comparable consciousness. Comprehending Schwaller de Lubitsch's concepts may facilitate a review of the philosopher Bergson's work addressed in the preceding chapter. Bergson posited that the brain and nervous system execute an eliminative function, permitting only essential information to permeate consciousness for our survival. This reduced consciousness offers a meticulously curated representation of reality, presenting us with the tangible, stable, three-dimensional world we recognize. Although this curated reality allows us to navigate life effectively, the representation of the world it provides is partial. It reveals only the superficial aspects and fails to offer insight into the underlying mechanisms. To gain some understanding of this, one might resort to a psychedelic substance, as Aldous Huxley did, or anticipate an unprompted mystical experience akin to Ouspensky's encounter on the Sea of Marmara. Nevertheless, poets and artists appear to be able to penetrate beyond the surface and access the essence of existence. Generally speaking, poetry represents the language of the inner self, whereas prose conveys the outer world. Bergson asserts that poets and artists can achieve this because they possess a cognitive mode that penetrates the dead exterior of objects, shaped by survival consciousness, and accesses their living interiors. Indeed, this cognitive mode exists within all individuals, but it operates at a heightened level for poets, artists, and those with analogous sensibilities. Bergson refers to this cognitive mode as intuition. In his formative years, Schwaller de Lubitsch studied under the painter Henri Matisse, a protégé of Bergson. As previously indicated, Schwaller de Lubitsch's concept of the intelligence of the heart appears to parallel Bergson's intuition. This comparison does not diminish Schwaller de Lubitsch's notion of a mere derivative of Bergson's, but rather illustrates that the inquiries raised by esoteric thought are not as peripheral as its detractors assert. Schwaller de Lubitsch's intelligence of the heart is a participatory mode of consciousness. Survival consciousness rigorously maintains the distinction between ourselves and the outside world. To navigate the world, we must be able to distance ourselves from it and distinguish clearly between I and not I. Yet, as Ouspensky experienced on the Sea of Marmara and Huxley did after taking mescaline, there are moments when this distinction dissipates. The invisible wall separating ourselves from the world vanishes, and I and not I seem to meld. In these instances, which occur more often than one might assume, albeit not always in the dramatic manner experienced by Huxley or Ouspensky, our consciousness engages with the universe. The distinction between I and not I appears to dissolve. This represents the intelligence of the heart, which Schwaller de Lubitsch posited as essential for comprehending the mysteries of ancient Egypt. In his work Esotericism and Symbol, Schwaller de Lubitsch asserted that reason, distinct from rationalism and aligned with nous, embodies the intelligence of the heart that enables us, through love, to become one with our surroundings, growing alongside plants, soaring with birds, gliding with serpents, and embodying the enigmatic connection described in Proverbs as the way of a man with a maid. Esotericism appeals to this form of reason. In his esoteric work, Nature Word, Schwaller de Lubitsch articulated that by understanding through the intelligence of the heart, we can roll with the boulder descending from the mountain, pursue the illumination and celebrate with the rosebud on the verge of blooming. Collaborate with the frugal ant, gather honey with the bee, and proliferate with the maturing fruit in the cosmos. Contrast this with Tat's observations of Hermes Trismegistus in Book 13. O Father, God has rendered me resolute. I perceive not with my eyes, but through the manifestation of spiritual energy within the faculties. I exist in heaven, earth, water, and air, as well as in living beings and flora. I am in the womb, before the womb, and after the womb. I am omnipresent. In his commentary on Book 3, G.R.S. Mead designates this section as the dawn of cosmic consciousness, and observes that this consciousness, whatever else it may be, transcends our three-dimensional limitation of consciousness. Although R.M. Book is not referenced in the index, Mead would have been familiar with his 1901 work Cosmic Consciousness when publishing Thrice Greatest Hermes in 1906. Schwaller de Lubitsch posited that hieroglyphics' participatory consciousness was inherent, aligning him with Jeremy Nadler within the Kircher school of Egyptology. He contended that contemporary interpretations of hieroglyphics and other Egyptian texts, including the Book of the Dead, are overly focused on literal meanings, akin to a consciousness unable to grasp metaphor when faced with poetry. For him, a rose is merely a rose devoid of additional significance. Schwaller de Lubitsch contended that contemporary consciousness suffers from cerebral consciousness, a mechanism that granulates reality into distinct fragments, disrupting the interconnections that permeate it, similar to the strands of a spider's web. All in the universe, Schwaller de Lubitsch asserted, is in interdependent connection with all, a statement reflective of hermetic philosophy. Similar to Bergson's concept of survival consciousness, cerebral consciousness serves a purpose and is essential, without which we would not have evolved. However, when it becomes dominant, as it does in certain reductionist, scientific worldviews, it can lead to disastrous outcomes. Because our science strives to understand the mysteries of life through its ordinary means of comprehension, it often results in statements similar to those made by the renowned astrophysicist Steven Weinberg, who famously stated that the more the universe seems comprehensible, the more it also seems pointless. 31. This is precisely the opposite of what Hermetic science discovers as it seeks to understand the cosmos. Each new gnosis, the universe, and everything in it, even an ashtray, becomes the locus of an almost overwhelming meaning. For Steven Weinberg, a grain of sand is just a grain of sand, and galaxies and planets are merely large accumulations. However, William Blake, who received his education in Hermetic science from Thomas Taylor and was naturally inclined towards it, perceives a grain of sand as a world and a wildflower as a source of heaven. However, Schwaller de Lubitsch refers to this other mode of cognition as the intelligence of the heart, also called the intelligence of the universe, which he claims will tell us everything. This unity evokes the insights attained by R.M. Buck, William James, and P.D. Ouspensky during their experiences of cosmic consciousness. Similar to cosmic consciousness, it transcends conventional understanding. Bucchi, James, Ouspensky, and even Hermes Trismegistus swiftly recognized that within this unity, our cerebral intelligence can no longer discern anything, and thus has no further role to play. To grasp the essence of this unity, Schwaller de Lubitsch posits that an alternative mode of cognition is requisite. He contends that this mode was so intrinsic to the ancient Egyptians that they constructed their entire religious framework upon it. Why were the Egyptians more acquainted with this modality. Consciousness in general was distinct during that era and less influenced by cerebral consciousness than it is presently. For conciseness, we can assert that the consciousness of ancient Egypt was more right-brained, oriented towards pattern and significance, in contrast to our contemporary ego-driven, analytical, left-brained consciousness. Schwaller de Lubitsch acknowledged this distinction. The two qualitatively different minds inhabiting the human psyche that he examined can be attributed to the two cerebral hemispheres. As Robert Lawler, Schwaller de Lubitsch's translator, observes, the localization of highly intuitive thought and nonverbal pattern recognition in the right hemisphere aligns with the predominant cognitive qualities that, according to Schwaller de Lubitsch, could have facilitated the creation of ancient Egyptian temple architecture and hieroglyphic inscriptions. Permitting this speculation allows for intriguing propositions if, as Nadler contends, the belief in a solid world, characterized as hard, dense physical substance, is what truly defines the Western mentality. Then it is conceivable that for ancient Egypt, the world was still permeable, and that within it a spiritual light shone, illuminating it with a divine radiance. Considering the implications of spiritual light and radiance supports this notion. I posit that a right-brain consciousness is essential for comprehending the hieroglyphics symbolically and their literal cerebral significance. Schwaller de Lubitsch steadfastly maintained this conviction while formulating his notion of symbolism. Both Schwaller de Lubitsch and Bergson were impacted by new physics during their formative years, notably by Niels Bohr's theories on light and Werner Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. As is widely recognized, Bohr resolved the protracted dispute between Christian Huygens and Isaac Newton regarding the nature of light, introducing the concept of complementarity, which posits that light possesses dual characteristics as both a wave and a particle. In certain contexts, light exhibits wave-like properties, while in others it manifests as a particle, leading to the term wavicle. Heisenberg's uncertainty principle asserts that the position and momentum of an elementary particle cannot be simultaneously known. Observing one obscures the other, resulting in uncertainty. Schwaller and de Lubitsch derived from the concept that reality may exist in two ostensibly contradictory states, a notion that our ordinary cerebral consciousness finds perplexing, yet our intelligence of the heart can embrace. Schwaller de Lubitsch referred to this simultaneity of opposite states as crucial to his interpretation of hieroglyphics. It embodies what he termed symbolic, integrating sensory perception, provided by cerebral consciousness, with inner knowledge, Bergson's intuition and the intelligence of the heart, in a creative duality. When observing the hieroglyph of a bird, Schwaller de Lubitsch contended that the Egyptians recognized it as a representation of the actual individual creature, while simultaneously understanding it as a symbol of its cosmic function, flight, along with all associated attributes. In summary, for Schwaller de Lubitsch, hieroglyphics not only represented but also conjured a notion akin to Athanasius Kircher's assertion, which I previously cited. A symbol is a notation signifying some arcane mystery. It directs our soul by reflecting a certain affinity to the intellect of entities distinct from sensory objects. The Hermetic principle of correspondence posits that the higher world corresponds with the lower world. This concept also embodies the essence of metaphor, a rhetorical device wherein one entity signifies another, a topic I have previously explored. The idea of correspondences is integral to Hermetic and esoteric thought. making it challenging to consider Hermeticism or esotericism without it. It is prominent in the esoteric scholar Antoine Favre's Fundamental Elements of Esotericism. Favre aims for us to interpret these correspondences. He asserts that the universe is an expansive theater of mirrors, a collection of hieroglyphics necessitating decryption. Everything serves as a sign. Everything harbors and emanates an enigma. Each object conceals a secret. He proceeds, seemingly recognizing Schwaller de Lubitsch. The included middle and synchronicity supplant the principles of non-contradiction and the excluded middle of linear causality, i.e., Hariuan Shi Mao. Cerebral consciousness. The concept of the universe as an ensemble of hieroglyphics, akin to a vast tome requiring interpretation, implies that the symbolic method, which entails simultaneous awareness of dual states, transcends mere comprehension of hieroglyphics. Numerous poets and intellectuals have employed this methodology universally without explicitly designating it. Ouspensky's insight unveiled the concealed marvels within an ordinary ashtray. The world transforms into a form of language, or more aptly a poem. In any event, it poses the challenge of uncovering its significance. Just as a book or poem reveals its meaning only through dedicated attention, so too does the natural world, the cosmos, and the entirety of existence communicate little unless I concentrate my focus, as Hermes suggests, and endeavor to comprehend the intentions of its creator, whoever that may be. In his significant foreword to Natureword, Christopher Bamford articulates, "The world only lives because it speaks to us in a language we can understand, and its significance becomes vibrant to the degree that we can assimilate it." Numerous observers, including Bamford, have remarked that we comprehend meaning via the senses, yet through the intellect, akin to perceiving through a window with our eyes, as elucidated in Book X of the Corpus Hermeticum. Knowledge is incorporeal. The organ which it employs is the mind itself. Consequently, the essence of a book appears not to reside within the book itself, but rather in the peculiar alchemy it incites within your mind. We have significantly progressed from Plato and other Western philosophers undergoing initiation in underground chambers beneath the pyramids. In this chapter, I have endeavored to elucidate Egyptian wisdom, which is believed to be the foundation of Hermeticism. These conjectures are naturally not comprehensive, but they are indicative.